would have lived in an environment where our homes would be placed and we would have our yard. And tonight we will be speaking with Sam, who will be telling us so much more of his yard. So in the meantime, let's take this one as we prepare ourselves for Sam.
Our Savior was so humble, they lay him in a stable. Rather spit his neighbor, he never cry nor grumble. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Since he was born, I'm so happy. Since he was born, I'm so happy. Since he was born, I'm so happy. Since Christ was born, I'm so happy. He was born to set me.
That's the voice of Gregory Riviere. Yes, sir.
He's in heaven waiting for me.
I'm so happy.
Oh, even me.
I'm so happy.
A wretch like me.
I'm so
Christ
happy.
came for me.
I'm so happy.
He was born to set me free from sin captivity, and now he's in heaven waiting for me.
I'm so happy.
Oh, what about you?
I'm so happy.
And what about you?
I'm so
He
happy.
came for me.
I'm so happy.
He was born to set me free from sin captivity, and now he's in heaven waiting for me.
I'm so happy.
Oh, even me.
I'm so
A
happy.
wretch like me.
I'm so
Christ
happy.
came for
I'm
me.
so happy.
Born to set me free from sin captivity, and now he's in heaven waiting for me.
I'm so
Oh,
happy.
hallelujah.
I'm so
Oh,
happy.
praise his name.
I'm so
Christ
happy.
came for me.
I'm so happy.
He was born to set me free from sin captivity, and now he's in heaven waiting for me.
I'm so happy.
I'm so happy, and tonight, as I said, we will be speaking to Sam. I just want to say good evening to our listeners, wherever you are at this time. Just want to make sure that you are tuned to the nation station DBS Radio. Let me say, first of all, good evening to Samuel Raphael. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening, Cecil. Thank you so much for the invitation to Lakou. It's an interesting topic, so it should be
Interested
interesting.
topic or interested name? Which one?
Well, it's an interesting name and an interesting topic because normally when I speak, it's on a specific topic. And so today it's a little different. I think you're talking about, I was told that you're going back to the root, to talk about the childhood and the things that influence us to become who we are. I think that's what it is. So it's an interesting conversation. So I want to thank you for inviting me to the Nation Station.
And you're a very good candidate, to be part of the LACO program, because many times people tend to think that, when you see men and women that are, how would I say it, that have more than others, they tend to think that person just got it. And not understanding the struggles that people have to go through. So tonight is a great opportunity where, Sam, you're going to give many people, many of our listeners, because I can tell you every Sunday, because of the nature of the program, people actually look out for the LACU. I don't want to say it's Beth, but I just want to know about the background of the person that have been successful. Last week we had a guy, many people mentioned to me during the course of this week how interested the guy was, because they looked at him as just another guy on the road, sometimes talking nonsense and so on. But when he came to the station, when he came to the mic of DBS, the mic of DBS Radio, the things that he was able to say and help to educate people, people were all amazed. So tonight is your time where you will be doing much more of that. So Sam, the way that we start the program is to give us a background of your growing up, to tell us about the church that you would have gone to, the preschool that you maybe would have gone first, if you can remember, and maybe if you can remember your teacher, and then we continue going along, and I'll ask you about your church life, and I know that you migrated, so we'll talk about that, but we'll take it in phases.
Okay, so I was born in the village of Belleville-Chopin, which is, for those persons who don't know that village, it's between Pichelin and Loubière. It's on the road to Grand Bay. So I lived in that village for the first 6 years of my life. My parents actually they migrated to Bellevue. At least my mom did, and my father, Raphael, was from Bellevue. My mom was a Thomas, and she came more from the Grand Bay area, Grand Bay Mountain, and so her mother had moved to Newtown for a while, and then when she was around 11, 12, they moved up to Bellevue, and she lived there, and she met my dad, and they got married. She was quite young. She was 17 and he was 22. And they immediately set to making children, and all boys came out. Eventually 7 came out. But by the time I migrated, which you mentioned, which was in 1967, it was 5 little boys. And my father left first in the early part of 1967 for St. Croix. At the time, the opportunities, people were looking for what they would see as better opportunities for their children. And the migration wave at the time was St. Croix, because you had the refinery opening up, an aluminum processing plant, and lots of jobs. And so my father went there early in 67, and then he sent for his family, and we moved there. I started school at the Bellevue, the primary school. It didn't have a preschool there at the time, and so I at that time I think the head of the school was Flossie Christian at the time, and my uncle was the head teacher, Gabriel Michael. He's my mother's brother. He was a strict disciplinarian, and so that's where I started school. But by the time I was in Standard 2, I was 6 years old. We migrated to St. Croix. So that's my background in Dominica.
I want you to get a little bit closer to the mic, Sam, because I'm told that the audio is a little bit low.
Right.
So we need to really get closer to the mic. No, Sam, it is strange that you are saying that you are from the southern side of Dominica. I'm sure not too many people might be aware of this because of your accent. Some people might think you might be from the Wesley Marigot area. I'm sure that you have gotten a lot of that when you tell people that your background is from the south.
Right. Well, I was 6 years old when I left Dominica, so my accent actually came along the way of my development. And so I have a strange accent, not necessarily Wesley and Marigot, because people in the Virgin Islands and in that area tend to, the accent and the language would be more, it would sound more like people from that area. So that's sort of where that accent thing would come from, but my family's from the south.
So let's go back a little bit in terms of you talking of education. And you said that you actually went to school in Bellevue.
Correct.
And you would have started in
primary school, correct.
Maybe at the age of 5.
Well, I think I was 4 at the time, because my uncle was the head of the school, and so they started me a little early, and but they kept me there in the Standard 1, and I was in Standard 2 by age 6, and that was late that year. My family, my mother came in with the exciting news that my father had sent for us. That was big news at the time, because that was a pattern. Dominicans were emigrating out, as they have, for much of the 20th century. And he had gone ahead to earn enough money to send for his family. I remember, just little anecdotes in our childhood. They had 5 little children, and he wanted her to come up with him and leave the kids with with relatives until and she refused. So she said she's not leaving not one of her little children behind, and so he had to go and hustle, and he worked very hard to be able to find work, and he had very little connections in St. Croix, and where he had to hustle and save every dime literally, and hustle on the weekends, whether it is do landscaping or washing cars. He did whatever he could, and he saved everything so that he could send for his family later that year. And so that's our migration there.
Your mom, while in Dominica, waiting for your dad to do everything to get across, what did she do during that period?
So we had garden like everybody else in the village. We had a garden outside. And again, I'm speaking through the eyes of a child, because based on what I saw then, as an adult, I'd probably see things a little differently. But we had our garden, and she went to the garden. My older brother, who was 2 years older than I am, he had to stay home with the children in the afternoon, the younger ones, and I was my mother's security company assistant, to carry things with her, because as a woman at that time, she was a big woman. But she was only 25 years old, but through the eyes of a child, I saw her as, this, but a 25-year-old woman shouldn't go in the bush by herself to do gardening, so she had to bring a little companion. So my older brother was the babysitter, and I was the security and assistant to my mother, and we went to the garden and got produce and whatever, and that's how we lived until, I remember her, because sometimes the men would leave, and they would promise the women to come back, and, one thing lead to the another, and they would carry on with their lives. So I was the one that was, she would tell her about her fears, the fear that my father wouldn't send for us, and sometimes she would break down crying, and that would be very, very touching to me, and so my mother and I had developed a special bond, probably during that time, and so she was quite elated when she got the news that the tickets were there, and it's time to get ready.
Would you remember while at primary school some of the teachers that you met there?
I don't remember, quite frankly, my teachers. I don't. I guys like Angelo Orman, Coffee Williams, these were my contemporaries in Bellevue School as kids. But I don't exactly remember the teachers.
But your uncle, as you said, was a teacher.
Yes, so he was a teacher. He didn't teach me because I was younger. He would teach the older kids, and he taught my older brother. You talk about influences. My older brother, Leroy, was a huge, huge influence on us. He was very academically driven, and he sought to excel, and as a result, it's like the little ones, you're expected to follow him because that's the expectation. And I remember he skipped the second standard 2, we went to 3, skipped standard 4, and was already in standard 5 when we migrated to St. Croix, because he was exceedingly bright, and so I was sort of the number 2, in his footsteps. So I had to step up the game a little, but he was always ahead of me. He was the good guy, and I was, the one that maybe was a little more troublesome than he was.
No, normally at that age, mothers or parents having children, they cling somewhat to the church. They always tend to think that God will have mercy upon them, God will provide for them. We hear all of these things in growing up. What about the life of your mother while your father was out in terms of the church?
Well, both my parents were very much into Christianity. They were Protestant. My mother was a Catholic when she was born, and at some point in her, around 12, 13, her mother and her got what they call converted, to Protestantism. So they joined the Gospel Mission Church in Bellevue, and that's how she met my dad, who, as a teenager, I don't know if he joined the church to get the girls or what, but he joined the church, and so they raised us in the church, and when I say my parents were devout Christians, they certainly were. And so in my life, the discipline, and the path that was set out, it was around the church. The church was the center of gravity of our family, and so that was very much a part of it. Yeah.
So you're saying the influence of you growing up, spirituality had to play some role, not just the community, but the spirituality of the belief that your church had. It helped in your development.
The belief of the church certainly was influential in a number of ways. Certainly in the things, the laws, the rules, what you can do and what you cannot do. Remember, at the time, when people say Christians, it was a very, you can't do this, can't do that, don't do this, a very prohibitive type thing. The Protestant work ethic, you have to work hard for everything you have. So those are the guiding principles that sort of were the foundation, from where I've come.
And I'm sure even if you were still 5, 6 years, there are some things that you would remember in reference to the community helping to shape you. Your dad is not there. Your mom now has to raise 5 boys. The community had some part to play in this.
Well, again, in a small village like that, it was very insular. And so it was very much a community of sharing. It's very different in today's world. I'm not saying it's better or it's worse, it's just very different. For instance, everyone had about the same amount of things. And you shouldn't have and your neighbor don't have. So if my mom killed a chicken, Sister Felixia would have to get a leg, Sister Sina would have to get a leg. This one, you bring one for Sister Manu up the road, a wing, I guess, is only 2 legs in a chicken. And so on. So whatever you had in the village had to be shared. And so that was very much a part of village life. You were also, at the time, and also the concept of the village raising a child, you couldn't be rude to any elder because, they would give you licks right on the spot. And you better not come home to your parent and let them hear that you whatever, because you would get the second installment of what they didn't give you on the road. So we grew up that way at the time. My parents didn't have much education. My mother had to quit school in Standard 5 because she was what they call an outside child of the household. And so she really wanted her education. She had to quit school to take care of the younger ones of the household. And she really, this had an impact on her because she always felt that was unfair to her. And she pushed us with respect to education. My father himself didn't have much of a formal education. So when they came together, one of the things they decided was that they're going to, make sure they provide, for their kids. But while we lived in the village, everyone was at the same. So we didn't consider ourselves as poor. The concept of poverty was something that I learned about later on in life because everyone just lived life. You work hard and you're going to achieve, at least my parents made us feel that no one was better or worse. I didn't feel like we were poor, country people and they were well. I was not exposed to this disparity in social thinking, and we were always raised with the concept you work hard, you study hard, and you can achieve anything in life. And that's what I grew up with. And somehow that's, sort of the philosophy that has guided me through life. And that came from the village in some ways. Everyone in the village didn't see things the same way, and maybe through the eyes of my childhood, because it's up to when I was 5, 6 years old, how your worldview is very limited. Your mind is limited. But there was, a very, very communal existence. If someone needed to move their house from one plot to the other, everybody pitch in. There's no concept of your work and my work and this other person's work. Everyone, the guys would all hustle in the gardens and do what they have to do. And in the afternoon, they would sit by the roadside and play dominoes. And that was what guys did. And women, stayed home because it was not well thought of for a woman to be knocking about, like that. So that's sort of the culture of the village. And those are the things that I remember about the village life in Dominica.
I'm sure that you will also remember the infrastructure in reference to roads, toilets, pipe-borne water.
Yes, certainly we didn't have that. We had the latrine. I remember I was very much afraid of that. I remember one night I did what I needed to do, in a corner of the house as a little boy, and I got in trouble in the morning because I was afraid to go to the latrine. And I remember that, it was near my father's shoe, and I got in serious trouble for that because of you had to go to the latrine, and I was afraid I would fall in. And no one would remember. I mean, I was a little child. And also going for water, you have to go to fontaine. Well, fontaine is a Creole word for the fountain. So fontaine is down close to Slow Corner when you leave Bellevue. And it felt like it's forever when I drive by there. Now, it's not that far. But as a little 5-year-old, I was like the smallest of the pack, especially when my father had left and you come home, you do your after school, you do your work, whatever, and then later on, all the boys have to get their bucket and go to Fontaine to get water for their moms or their parents. And little Sambo, that would be me. I would be last one, with my bucket, and the boys would tell me about Jumbi coming, and everybody run, and I'm running and crying and coming up the road, and then my bucket is half empty when I get home, So, but that's when you mention it. Certainly, that was the infrastructure. So we didn't have the modern things that people have now. We all went and fetched water from the fountain, and everyone used the latrine. And when it got too full, you kind of dug another pit and you used that. Sometimes it was more like the communal latrine in the area that we lived in. So there was one latrine that served many people. Everyone in every house had their outdoor kitchen. So when your mom might send you across the road, she called her sister Felixia, but it's a Orman, and go and get some fire for me, because they don't have matches, and you keep the fire going in your kitchen. And when your neighbor out of fire, they send you to get a charcoal of fire. You put the fire near your wood and you fan it until you now have the fire to cook your food. And so that's the social conditions under which I was born and lived. And today I still don't see that as poverty. That was life. That's what we knew. We weren't lacking of anything. I do not ever remember being hungry. I don't know the concept of that, or needing anything that I didn't have,
But I need to also make mention of electricity.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like some.
But certainly that was foreign. That was totally foreign.
That's like 56 years ago, 56 years ago. That's about 2 generations.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like? Still as a 5-year-old, at nighttime, knowing that there is no electricity, or even during the daytime, that you have to, as you said, your mom had to kill her fowls and so on. How life was without a fridge, without.
Well, we had a fridge, but it was the yard, So the fridge was this tree, this guava tree, this tree there, and you just hop from tree to tree like a bird, and that's your fridge, And and we didn't know about ice and these things. I remember I had an aunt, Sister Manu, and for her wedding, she got this machine to make ice cream, and I still remember it with the salt. And I was a little child, so that was the exposure to ice cream. And so we certainly didn't. And the nights, the only light natural light is the moonlight, or maybe a labelle, which is, the little firefly. And maybe the little boys would catch a labelle and we'd hold it as much as we can, and that would be, just fun stuff. Our light, you always lit a lamp. And in many cases a candle. The lamp would maybe be in a central place. It seemed like it was bright to us at night because that's all, our eyes were adjusted to that. I remember as a little boy, though, I took the candle and went to get something, and I burnt my parents' clothes. I literally caught the house on fire. Not the whole house, but certainly where the clothes were. And I remember much fanfare about beating the clothes to get that fire out that I set, because I moved the candle. I was a little boy. I was probably 3-4 years old, and I didn't know any better,
Mom didn't scream at you, didn't get a flogging?
Well, I probably did, because, that was not uncommon, but I was more terrified that I had caught the light. If my mom gave me a flogging, that was welcome, because that was preferred to my dad's flogging. So if something happened, you almost run to mom for your flogging to get it, early, because you didn't want dad to, to to give you that flogging.
What was your first experience of I shouldn't say first experience. What was, did you ever hear the word Roseau during that period of time?
Yes, and I came to Roseau a couple of times, but not many. We didn't have a car, of course. So you would take a lorry. So the occasions that my mom would bring me to Roseau was very rare, and we would jump on the lorry and would take us to Roseau. I remember when we were getting ready to leave, I had to go to the doctor here, and I guess to get immunizations or whatever, and also to take a passport picture. So we went to Roseau, but there wasn't much. The village and Roseau were completely separate at the time. And it was very unusual. My mother would go on Saturdays to sell produce from the village and to buy and come back in the basket, and you would help her when she come up the road with the basket. You'd run to the stop and help her. But it didn't have much business in Roseau at the time.
No, Sam. Your first experience getting to Roseau, when you heard that you're going to get to Roseau, what time of the morning would you get up from bed and to get prepared to get to Roseau?
But I wouldn't know what the first experience was. I don't know.
You're excited when you were told. That's what I'm trying to find out.
Yes, you're excited. You're told. It's a big deal. It's a big field trip to go to Roseau. I was actually born in the village of Bellevue, Cecil. Transportation to Roseau was a big thing. And my parents told me, of course, I don't remember that, but they thought that it was about time for me to be delivered, and my father hired a truck to take my mom down, and they work hard, and money is hard to come by, and they got a truck, and they took me down to Roseau, and I wouldn't come out, and I was not ready yet. And then the truck took me back home, and then here it is my mom saying, oh boy, ready to come. So it was like, I can't go back to Roseau twice, So they got the midwife, Mamani, from across the road. That's Mrs. Orman from the Florida area. And she came over as the midwife, and that's how I was born in the village. Mamani told me, several years later, she died recently, may her soul rest in peace. But you always see, I was her favorite because I was so difficult to come out, and she knew I was trouble from back then because I was born breeched. I had my navel string, wrapped around my neck, and if she wasn't very skilled, I would not have survived. And so I had already turned blue. She chased everyone out of the room, and she had to push me back in and turn and get that navel string off from around my neck because I was suffocating. So she reminded me of that. So my navel string is buried in Bellevue, actually. I'm one of those people that was not born in Princess Margaret Hospital.
That is amazing to hear, and today that you are surviving, and it speaks volume of you coming on this earth and having to give a contribution to the... Now, in reference to your siblings, how do you remember them in Bellevue in terms of playing, being troublesome, going to school? How would you describe your siblings and yourself in that yard, in that laku?
We were quite young again, but, we'd like to find a lime and a cocoyer, bat, or a sec, we would call it, which is the metal from a metal drum that you would, those are big finds, that you would run behind the sec with a stick and push it, down the road. That was a toy, but toys are things you made, and the boys, we didn't have all these balls and things like that, So you kind of had to make do and create things to play a little cricket with the boys around. And if you happen to have a football, that was big luck, and you played with the boys, with my siblings, with my brothers, and so on. And that was that it was we worked hard, but Cecil, when you do what everyone else does, it's normal to you. So I just felt like I lived a normal, charmed life. You get up, you hustle, you have to go to school, you go to school, you come back, you play with your friends, you have to do your work and you play, and then you have to go and get your water, and you have to help out your mom, maybe to go to the garden in the afternoon or whatever. And life just went on as a normal, happy childhood.
Then that day came, the day when your mom said to you that Daddy has bought 6 tickets, 5 for the children and 1 for me, the mother, to get to St. Croix. Give me your expression as a 5-year-old. How did you take it? How did you make of it? Were you elated? Were you sad that you were living in an environment that your customer, even if you were 5 years of
6
age?
years old.
6 years of age? Were you...
Well, she was elated, but she kept it a secret, because at the time you don't tell your business because people will mess you up. People believed in, in people doing evil things spiritually to them and whatever, or gossiping. So she was not going to let out the secret to the village, So she told us like 3 days before, you can tell your friends you don't go to school from tomorrow, because the day after or whatever, we're going on a plane and we're going to St. Croix to meet your father. He sent for us. So she's happy. My older brother, Leroy, he was excited. And the younger ones, the one we call Derek, he's a Rastafarian now, we go by Alula. He was, I guess he was 4 years old. He was happy. And Desmond, was so small, 3 years old. Of course, everybody, it's a happy day except me. I was the only one that was not happy. I was scared. Not for the reasons that you mentioned, but I had seen airplanes flying over, Dominica. From time to time you see a plane flying as a little boy. And I always thought a plane was like a truck, a lorry, which had an open back. And around the time we left, shortly before that, a truck gave way going down to Roseau from Bellevue and around Slow Corner and area. It went down the hill and some people died. And so when I, to go on a truck, I was scared because I would think that you would, and in my mind, the people fell off the side of the truck and died. And I was thinking, if people could fall off a truck that's on the road, what if I fall off the airplane from the sky and fall down and die? So I was very much afraid of falling off the side, not the airplane crashing, but falling from the top of the airplane because I thought it was a sit-on-top airplane, So I was quite pleased when we got to the airport. No one had told me, and I saw this thing, and you go inside, and you cannot fall off the top of the airplane. So I was relieved when I actually got into the actual airplane.
So that morning, you all got up?
Oh, we got up early. It had to be about 3 o'clock because the road to the airport was not. It was rugged. I think a taxi driver, Paquette or Paget or something like that at that time, was the one that took us, and he brought us to the airport. But he probably left our house at 3 o'clock in the morning. It was way before morning, and drove up the bumpy road to Melville Hall Airport. At that time, it was, remember, 67. So the road to the airport was nothing like it is now. And so we got out there and got on the plane and headed to St. Croix.
On your way to the airport, I'm sure that your other brothers, because now you're in a car which is supposed to be taking maybe 4 people, now has to take 6. Give us that experience.
Well, we were little children, so
Okay.
we were very happy to get in a car. We didn't have much with respect to car experiences, before that time. My grandfather had a car. My grandfather was a policeman, and so he would sometimes drive past, but I never got to ride in his car. He was an inspector, Masito Thomas, and he got killed in Granville in 1966, I believe it was. So a year before we left, he was killed in action. And he had a car that he would drive by. But we didn't get to ride in cars. The few experiences I had was in a lorry with my mom, and a handful of experiences traveling vehicles. So we were quite. The excitement, it was just an exciting experience,
and
to go to the
within that
New Land.
experience, the Protestants, before they leave, they would ask the blessings of the Lord. So I can imagine your mom taking all of you all and praying together.
But of course, every day we prayed. Every day we got up, we prayed. Every day we got up to a morning devotion. And this was commonplace in my household. This was mandatory, obligatory. So I've probably gone through the Bible at least 5 times. So we would read a section every day. You get up to obligatory reading of the scripture and prayer. There was prayer. It was a constant state of prayer. Pray before when you get up, pray before you go to sleep, pray before every meal, pray every excuse you can get. Was with a prayer. So certainly, before you embark on a journey, you have to pray and ask for forgiveness, for safety as you go on your way. So absolutely. I don't remember the specific prayer, but I can tell you, my mother wasn't going to move 3 steps without praying. So
You all arrived at the airport. Mom took everyone's passport.
I was 6. I don't remember that part.
That would be normal. She would have taken everybody's
Right.
passport, and the next moment you would have found yourself on a plane. What plane was it?
I think it was Liat, because at the time it was Caribbean. Liat, I think that was flying. I think it was Liat, yeah.
And then you get onto the plane. And I can imagine you looked all over. I can imagine you asked your brother a question or you all spoke.
I wouldn't remember the contents of that conversation. at
But
this
I
point.
can imagine that you all would have done that. As
Probably.
6-year-olds getting onto a plane for the very first time.
Absolutely.
There would be some level of excitement. No.
But I was excited because I was inside the airplane and not on top. so I was good, you know. So any conversation would be positive at that point coming from me.
Arrived in St. Croix. Your first expression as a boy, that we would remember, you know, leaving Dominica, coming to St. Croix, you know, your dad would be waiting for you all. What was the expression like on arrival?
He was happy to see us. We were happy to see him. But it was kind of anticlimactic, you know, because, you know, St. Croix was a little flat, was a little dry. And I remember my first thought of St. Croix back then, it just, you know, was not the Dominica I was familiar with. And probably that's because I was just not, you know, I was used to Dominica. And we are creatures of habit, you know, and we're used to. So I was, all of a sudden we were in a new environment and we have to, you know, do we get to walk out the house? Do we have to stay in? And we stayed in a very small tenement house when we first got to St. Croix. We were staying in our small house in Dominica, but my father was renting this very small place in an area called Grove Place on St. Croix. And there were a lot of what you call alien people living there. So we were alien. We were part of the alien population. That's people who are not from the Virgin Islands. At that time, St. Croix attracted a lot of aliens because Castro had recently nationalized U.S. interests in Cuba, and U.S. investors were spending a lot of money, they say, on the safety of the Virgin Islands in the safe space, you know, under the U.S. flag. So there was a lot of work, and they didn't have the workers. And at the same year we moved to St. Croix, the St. Croix used to be a sugarcane island, and the same year we moved to St. Croix, the sugarcane industry ended. So 1967, Bethlehem Estate closed up. That was the last of the sugar plantations, and so they needed a lot of alien people to do the low-end menial work. Just like any place else, you've got people moving, whether they move to the UK during a certain time, whatever. You don't have enough people to fill the low-end jobs, and that's what we came to do. And there were lots of quote, aliens that were coming in, and a lot of them were being exploited. They were brought in to do work, and the immigration status was in limbo. And as a result, you know, supervisors would take half their pay just so, you know, else if you say anything, they will call the immigration, and the local population was hostile towards alien people because in the Virgin Islands, unlike most places in the U.S. Virgin Islands, there was no local control of immigration. It was all federal. And so the federal government made a rule to allow these people to come in. The locals were not very happy. So they were doing everything in their power to make it difficult for these people who were invading their space, you know, and they thought that they were going to come to steal, you know, whatever you think of. Sometimes I hear comments that we make as Dominicans about Haitian people or people from outside, and I speak in defense of these people, and some people wonder why. It is because of that experience that we were treated as unwanted outsiders when we came to Dominican, to St. Croix, and my parents just wanted to work hard and to find a better way of life. So I had to quickly get adjusted to that reality. It's an adult topic, but as a child, you're being called an alien every step of the way. We were not allowed to go to school in 1967 when we migrated to the Virgin Islands. Alien children were not accepted in the schools in the United States Virgin Islands. You had to be you had to be a citizen or a permanent resident, and that was not something you got very easily. And so alien people had to go to what they call alien school, which is a parochial school. And in Grove Place, there was the AME Zion Pastor Gordon had a Caribbean community school, and the church found, you know, it lucrative to create a school for these alien children around Grove Place, because Grove Place you had the traditional Crucian families that went to the public school, and the alien kids went to alien school, but you had to pay. And my parents certainly didn't have the money to pay to send us to school. And my mother had the one for all for one rule. So she's not going to send the older one to school, and I'm not getting to go to school, and my younger brother Derek can't go to school. So basically none of us got to go to school for a period of about a year. And during that time, there was a class action lawsuit filed against the government of the Virgin Islands by some young lawyers in the Virgin Islands. They weren't immigration lawyers, but they felt if the federal government was forcing the Virgin Islands to accept alien children, that it would be creating a two-tier society and problems for the islands down the road if you had a mass of uneducated people. And so if that's the case, then they should be educated, and whether the United States government, the Virgin Islands government, can force the United States or get money from them to support the education of these alien children, that they didn't want uneducated children. So I sat out 1 year watching kids go by, and I remember for my mother in particular, she valued education, because remember I told you earlier, she had to quit school in Standard 5 to take care of her siblings. And her mother, incidentally, had to quit school at some point for some reason. And my grandmother loved to read and loved education. My mother, they didn't have education, but they wanted us to have an education. So for my parents, that was a big issue. For my mother, she felt maybe it was better if she had stayed in Dominica. At least her kids would be able to get an education. That's what she wanted most for her kids. And she don't know when she'll be able to send her kids to school, because so for her it was I remember the conversations coming from her, and she was really lamenting the fact that we were not getting education. Of course, whatever they could get their hands on, they did and brought it home, and we had to read. Certainly the church we went to, it was a missionary-led church, and they got some books for us, and we had to read. We had to read a lot. But we skipped out on a formal education for a year until the lawsuit was completed, and the next year we were September 1968. I was able to go to Grove Place Elementary School.
Now, Sam, arrival to St. Croix. You left Dominica, or you all left Dominica, where you all had no lights, no one running water, infrastructure of roads were bad, but right now you are in St. Croix.
And the streets were paved with gold.
What was the difference?
Well,
infrastructure.
It was different, but not paved with gold. The roads were not, too developed, because it was one generation from donkey and cart. In the Virgin Islands. Remember, it was a keen cutting, peasant type economy until 1967 on St. Croix. And actually, this old man that lived, right across from us still had his 2 carts that his donkey used to carry, to drag along. When we moved to St. Croix, we had outdoor plumbing, just like we had in Dominica with the latrine. So we moved. It wasn't much. Certainly we had a light in the house, some level of electricity, but we didn't have a refrigerator. There was someone in the tenement that had a refrigerator, and if you needed to refrigerate something, you asked that neighbor if you could put something until you can improve yourself. But getting your first fridge was a pretty big deal in Grove Place, in the area that we lived. Many people lived, there was an old bus, an abandoned old bus, and someone was renting sections of that. So that's like you had 4 families that lived in one, like a long school bus. And that's how they lived, with the outdoor plumbing. And so, it wasn't a huge improvement from what we lived in, but certainly there was more U.S. cash. So some people, think immediately moving to those places, you move to streets paved with gold, etc. It wasn't. And for us, after, not being able to go to school, after a lot of things, I remember, the first year was very difficult, because I felt that we were better off in Dominica than we were in St. Croix.
I can imagine you maybe sometimes saying, why did we leave?
Correct.
And I need to go back home.
Well, I wouldn't say I need to go back home. I didn't have that right to
At
make
the back
that
of your mind,
declaration.
at the back of your mind, that
Yeah,
would be-
way in the back of my mind, maybe.
Yes.
Yes. You didn't articulate those thoughts.
No, Sam, you would have met, even if you're now 6 years, going to 7, you have met new friends.
So we met some friends in the yard. Some of them were in the same situation we're in. You know, the Phillips from Antigua or the Richards from St. Kitts. They were different islands, alien people living in that yard. And we made friends, and of course we played cricket. So there maybe you get a tennis ball, a wind ball, and you play cricket, and we often race. You know, you don't need too much infrastructure to race. You know, you kind of just pick a path and you race. And there were many fruit trees in that yard. So we had a lot of mango trees, including we had a small house we lived in. But every time a mango fell on the galvanized, everybody scampered outside, you know, to get that mango, because you know a nice ripe mango fall in the house. But there were mango trees all around where we lived in Grove Place. So when we didn't have to go to school, we'd get up in the morning, and like it's a job we were going to, you go hunting for all types of kennep. You know, there was apricot, as we call it, in the gut close to where we live. You know, and there's papayas and guavas, and you just name it. And so we did a lot of fruit hunting. When I was quite young, it was like when you read the Huckleberry Finn story, you know, stories that Mark Twain wrote. We lived that idyllic life in the neighborhood, and everyone had kids, and we kind of hung out together. We played together. We got maybe a ball and played football, which is what we knew, but it's soccer up there or whatever. And we didn't have playgrounds as such. The playground was the yard, you know, and there was still a little apprehension in the yard, because you had two sets of people that lived in the yard. Those that had legal status, like we had legal status. My dad had a bond, and we got permanent residency shortly after. And others who came in through like the back door or maybe overstayed, and there were immigration sweeps. And unlike the federal rule, immigration was something that was handled by the police, and oftentimes they were overzealous, and so they would come sweeping you. All you hear is immigration, and people climbing on trees, hiding, people doing all sorts of things, and all these guys are coming around to try to sweep, to find these alien people who are living unlawfully, to take them and deport them back to where they come from. So that was a major thing when immigration passed. You know, everybody asking who's still there, who left, who's there, and then you know you hear the adults talk about, oh boy, they got that one, oh boy, they got that one, and so on. So it was a very difficult existence, and people had to go through a lot.
You're saying the greatest challenge for many of the aliens was that of immigration.
Yes.
And I can imagine people like yourself, as a young boy, not knowing definitely of your status, you too would feel.
Well, my parents were clear that we had legal status, so they had the bond papers, so they
that
didn't run and hide.
you all knew that in advance.
We knew that in advance.
So
They didn't
that
run
wasn't
and
a
hide.
problem for you all.
Yeah, but we certainly were not to discuss it or report anybody, and you know, when immigration come, just sit inside the house and don't answer, don't say anything, you know, let your parents deal with it, because as kids you don't want your children to tell, you know, they ask you who's there, where, you know, and then somebody may be hiding. I don't remember us hiding anyone in the house, but other people would allow people to get safe spaces to hide. You know, sometimes the immigration would maybe have informants, and they would say so and so, so they come looking for this one or looking for that one. You know, so that was traumatic at the time.
So while the yard might have been of great fun, but it also was of great challenge.
Yes.
And in that challenge, I'm sure that there would have been ways that you all, when I say you all, that these parents would have developed to ensure that their children do not are not deported back to their original countries. How did these parents had to deal with those immigration?
But oftentimes the immigration, the ones that are overstaying were the adults, because they didn't get to bring their children anyway. You know, so most time you don't hear it. Once you bring your children, you're not going to bring your children into such an unstable situation. So most of the times, those that are deported, rarely would it be people with their children that maybe they lost their job and they lost their bond. You got bonded by your place of work. So basically, you could get like a work permit, And once that is no longer valid, then they tell the immigration, and the immigration, if you're not gone, they come and look for you and your family, and they deport you. So for us, it wasn't such a threat, but oftentimes they would do, from time to time, sweeps, without looking for specific people, or when they do, you see everybody running, scouring, because immigration coming and they don't want them to hold them, and send them back. Yeah, so
It's now past a year. You're now in school. You're much more comfortable. What was the life like now at that time at school? How more advanced that you all were? I'm talking about you and your siblings than those nationalized citizens of St. Croix.
Then the local the local people, the native people, there we found certainly in the reading and writing and in that space, we were better students. At the time, the school I went to was Grove Place Elementary School, and they were basically running two schools there because St. Croix has seen a pattern of immigration. Not too long before that, 50s and 40s and 60s, a lot of Puerto Ricans moved into St. Croix, and they live in Calcahoon, which is sharing the same school. So there was a Spanish language program in the school. So maybe a quarter of the school was all Puerto Rican, and they taught them in Spanish, and they were all Spanish. And then the Crucian kids were in English, and then all of a sudden you get a doubling of population of these alien children that come in, and the teachers had to make adjustments. It must have been very difficult for them to have to go through all of that. But we fit right in. Kids are kids, At the first day of school, second day, everyone calling you an alien this and an alien that, and you figure, maybe that's your name because, they hear their parents talking about those aliens and that they just are Garrett from St. Lucia, Antigua, or Gasson from Dominica, and who from wherever. And but within a few weeks, you're kids and you become friends with everyone, and you just do what you play, whatever games, whoever is the fastest runner, you get recognized as that, whoever. Of course, it wasn't cricket then. You learn how to play softball and baseball and American football, but a lot of basketball, and these things. And then, of course, the soccer. Yeah, and some of us from the islands were really strong on the soccer. I remember by the time we got to Grove Place, competed in interscholastics, one year we didn't lose a game in any sport. Not one game in, not a track meet, not a soccer game, not a softball game, not a football, not a basketball. So we were a powerhouse, and especially in the soccer, they really appreciated these alien kids because we just totally dominated. So it was lots of interesting fun. The second grade, I remember my St. Croix teachers, Miss Navarrete, she was from the Philippines. And then I went to the third grade, and her name was Miss Adams. She's Miss Hendricks. And I always count her as the teacher that molded me the most. And she was unfortunate because she had me in the third grade, and then they promoted her when I was in the fourth grade in Miss Burke's class to fifth grade. And then I show up in her class in the fifth grade, and she said, "Raphael, you again?" And there I was. I was a good student, but I wasn't, maybe I was a little mischievous at the time, and then I was in Miss Christopher's class in the sixth grade. It was elementary school was an amazing time for me. I remember when I was in the fifth grade. Fifth grade is a big thing for Grove School because fifth graders get to do a trip, and you hustled all year. You had big sales. You did everything to raise money for the class trip, and our class trip was a trip to St. John. I hadn't been on an airplane since we got to St. Croix, and it was a few years, and we not just an airplane, but a seaplane. I remember the tickets were $15 from Christiansted to Cruise Bay St. John, and we were going camping at Cinnamon Bay Campground, and that was a big deal. That was excitement, and we all did. The teachers, Miss Adams would always be threatening, or Mr. Steele, he taught the other fifth grade, if you don't do this, we'll have to cancel the trip. So they got us to be well behaved in the fifth grade because everybody was excited about the trip, and we flew to St. John, and the seaplane landed and went to Cinnamon Bay, and that that was the genesis of Jungle Bay, actually, because when I enjoyed that camping experience so much, did a 5 mile hike there, did all the things, and that was at the point to study the environment. I decided I don't want to be a fireman. I don't want to be, any of those things. When I grew up, I want to have a campground like this. And ultimately, that had been in the back of my mind throughout my career, through my life, which is why I came to Dominica and developed Jungle Bay. And that's,
no.
So that's a big jump from our conversation, but I'm just...
No, Sam. The alien parent, the alien children now have to go to the homes of the parents who call you all aliens. How did you all marry your relationship with their children and having to get to their homes?
As children?
As children.
I can tell you as an adult too, which is an interesting story in my case. But as children, children don't take on things too, you go through. Eventually they say you're humans. You don't have a tail. You don't have horns. Some of you may be even decent people. So when you live among people, and then where we lived, the landlord, she expanded it, made it more comfortable, charged us more, of course, but it became a nice little 2-bedroom. My parents had one, and we had a bedroom and an open space in the living room, and we had an indoor plumbing for the first time, maybe a couple of years in, and they built the kitchen. My dad helped her do that. So they expanded the rental house in Grove Place, and that's where we lived. And my dad got a job at the oil refinery, and so things were looking up, and basically the people that lived in Grove, the natives, had somewhat better houses, but we never even paid notice to that because kids played with kids. We didn't, look at the size of the house or whatever. We were more interested in what kind of fruit trees you have in your yard. If you got juju, or if you got whatever, if you got soursop or sugar apple or whatever, and we picking on that tree and there. So we all kind of, at that point, everybody kind of, after the first year, everybody got to kind of know each other, and we just kind of gelled pretty much. I mean, when people are pissed off, kids get upset, and the kids can be mean. They do resort to calling you an alien, if you do something or whatever. But 99% of the time, you put that difference aside, and you have your friends and you do. So I grew up with Crujan buddies, and whatever, and all of a sudden that alien thing, after a few years, just dissipated it from our day-to-day relationships.
Then you had to find yourself getting to high school. What was the experience like?
Yeah, okay, so I will jump with the alien thing and give you a little anecdote. So I told you some young lawyers filed a lawsuit against the government of the Virgin Islands, the governor, Hosea, Hosear, versus Evans, who was the governor, Melvin Evans of the Virgin Islands. And they forced the government of the Virgin Islands to allow alien children in the school, and these young lawyers won the case. And it's a major U.S. civil rights, education rights case in the 60s, and that has implications throughout the United States even today. Well, one of the young lawyers in that case, I married his daughter later on, and he is the grandfather of my children. So he didn't realize it at the time, but he was advocating for the rights of his grandchildren. So it's funny how the circle of life goes, and where you end up, where you start from and where you end up, because he was, top, by the Lieutenant Governor of the Virgin Islands, and so that all of a sudden now, that's my home and my family and my people, and so there had to be reconciliation. So sometimes when there are differences, social differences, we need to learn to move beyond them, because at the end, people are people. He was just like myself, and he's my father-in-law, but he called himself my father because that's the relationship we had, and other prominent Virgin Islanders who made serious marks, and many of them came on board. And it was at the time of black nationalism too. So some of them really saw through the immigration policy as a divide thing, and they felt that there was a United Caribbean. So there was a United Caribbean Association, and people decided, at some level, this thing is black people need to support each other and not have this, alien who's from here, who's from there, because we really don't control where we were born. And these are colonial powers and why are we just from one island to the other with the same people, very different from Americans. So there was that whole consciousness movement, and so yeah, but that evolved over time. So I took you off track. Go back to your question now.
The question was, now you're making a transition into high school.
Okay.
How was that transition?
So I went to junior high school. That's the first time I had to take a bus to go to school, because around Grove Place there was no high school. So I went to Elena Christian, it was called, in Christiansted, and went to high school. And of course it was different, because up to the 6th grade you have one homeroom teacher, and that teacher would teach you all subjects. So when I reached to junior high was 7th and 8th grade, and high school was 9, 10, 11, 12. So junior high, I went to Elena Christian, and of course you have different teachers, a different class, and you got to get homeroom, and then you got to go to English, and you got to go to this math and sign up for this. So that was an interesting year for me, adjustment with that. I did well as a student, like I said, because my older brother set the pace. He was skipped, so he was 3 years ahead of me, even though he was just 2 years older than I was. And he was always, he sought to excel. And I knew the work, but I didn't seek to get A's on everything. I could have, like most people, but I had interest in sports. So I was always, the athlete of the year or different things. I was very much into sports, and he was very much into academics. But we all did very well, because my parents, even though, they didn't have a high level of education, they would not allow. And during that time when we were still in Grove School, I was in 5th or 6th grade, there was an opportunity for alien people or persons to get the equivalency of 8th grade. And my mother took the opportunity. She took advantage of that and did night school. And it was difficult for her by that time she had the 6th child. She eventually had 7 of us. You have 6 small children, and that time she got a job in a watch factory to help support the household, and in the evening you got to rush to go to night school, and so that was challenging. Also, she found a means of additional financial support for the household. Our landlord worked at a golf course that was up the road from us. It was Fountain Valley Golf Course at the time, and they needed someone to wash the uniforms of the maintenance workers. So they had 50 jack shirts. They were blue with a stripe. I remember them clearly. And so she asked my mom. Actually, there was an incident where I lost $1. And that led to that, because my mom gave me $1 on a Wednesday to go and buy 50 cents bread so they can drink our cocoa tea and bread before school. And frivolous me, I went to the bread shop across the gut, and I lost $1, and I came back, and she was crying so much. I thought it was the last dollar my family owned, but it was the last dollar she had available at the time. There was no bank or anything, how she's going to feed the children. And then my same neighbor, Miss Alice, pulled me aside, and she said, "You lost $1?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Here, I want you to take this $1, and I know you go to church with your mom, but you're going to have to lie to your mom and tell her that you found $1. Tell her you found $1, and you're going to go." And so I had to lie to my mom, because she would not have accepted charity from anyone. She would not accept a handout. And so I told her I found $1, and she sent my brother with me because she wasn't going to let me lose it again. And Miss Alice saw the economic condition, and she then got the gig at the golf course. And so my mother she brought my mom 50 shirt jacks, and we had to wash the shirts on Saturday and iron them after church on Sunday so that Miss Alice could have the 50 shirts, and we got 50 cents a shirt to wash, 50 cents to dry. My mother was the supervisor of the household, and my brother Leroy and I were the worker bees. So Miss Alice would bring the shirt. Before we got to play on Saturday, we got a wash board and a basin outside. One of the silver metal bath pans, I should say, and fill it with water. There was a standpipe. We got the water there and our soap, and we would hand wash the 50 shirt jacks. And the two of us, little boys, we were probably, 7 or 8. I was 7 or 8, and my brother was either 9 or 10. And we would wash those things diligently on the washboard and rinse them and hang them on the line. And on Sunday after church, you know what you got to do. If you want to play time, we have to iron those and iron them neatly. And so my brother and I had to come up, and at first we had, we didn't have electric iron at the time. You had the goose. And so you put it on, you had something with a fire, you put it on and you iron and make sure everything is ironed properly. And my mother was a taskmaster because she didn't want Miss Alice to be disappointed. She had helped us out. And so that brought an additional cash flow into the household. So those are little experiences that kind of taught me the value of hard work, the value of, saving, because my parents were diligent at saving. And an anecdote to the golf course, actually, a few decades later, I sat with the then owner who was seeking to have me purchase the golf course, and I considered acquiring, and it was either to come to Dominica to develop Jungle Bay, or I was going to buy that very golf course that I was that I had to watch the short jocks for, which shows you, in life, there are no limits, there are no boundaries to what you can achieve.
That's amazing, that you started the process of your development by washing and ironing.
Correct.
And later on, you were requested to purchase that same property. Tell us a little bit, because I want to go back to the educational aspect of you being in high school.
Okay, so I will go back to the education. So we went to junior high school. After the 7th grade, during that time, there was a big strike at the refinery where my father worked. And they made some changes. And part of the strike was that the professionals that were brought in, their children got private education. And the local people, there was a disparity. They had to send their kids to the public school, and there was huge benefits. These private schools had resources, and they were much better education. So my father had worked hard, and he was made a supervisor on the dock around that time in the refinery. And his kids now got to go to private school, the elite private school on the island, Good Hope School. And so in the 8th grade, I didn't go back to Elena Christian Public High School. I all of a sudden ended up going to the most elite private school, Good Hope School, and that's where I commenced my 8th grade education. So I started there. It was very challenging for me because the social and the job. I was the only black boy in my class at the time. And maybe I wasn't prepared at some level, and the school wasn't prepared for me, but it wasn't a good fit. And there will always be issues and problems, and I always felt that I was being picked on. Maybe I was, and maybe, maybe it's 50-50. Maybe I was just socially maladjusted for the situation, a combination of that. But it wasn't a good fit. And at the end of the 8th grade, the principal told my parents, called them in, and they said that they don't want me back at that school. And so I was kicked out of school in the 8th grade, which is interesting, of course. I remember you asked me if I got whipped for anything. I knew that I was finished when I got home. And all my father said at the time was, I know you want to follow the bad boys, you want to go to public school, and next thing I hear, all kind of trouble coming from you. I'm not going to let that happen. And he re-enrolled me in a parochial school, an Episcopal school, St. Dunstan. And I didn't get a whipping for that. So I remember, I sort of remember when I didn't get a whipping, when it was probably coming more so than when I got a whipping.
Any discussion with your father and your mother when that principal decided that they were going to get you or kick you out from that school?
Yes. So my father would never come to school. It was all my mother's stuff. And so the day they called my parents and I saw my mother and father, and I knew that was it. I knew... because Leroy was a good kid, and everyone wondered why couldn't I be like him, It was one of those. He was in 11th grade, and he was doing well. He was going to go to university, and he was going to be a doctor, and he was this. And there you have this other one. And then my other brother, Derek at the time was 1 grade behind me, and he was, doing okay. But this one, this goat between the two sheep, So my mother was very upset at me, and my father basically told me, told me a few things, and that I, so they sent me and a younger brother of mine to St. Dunstan's Episcopal School that year, and I started in 9th grade. I was a bright student, but I just was not. I just had some social adjustment issues. Yeah.
Do you consider it a social adjustment or building a consciousness of yourself, blacks against whites?
It was a little of that. I always had a kind of, you would say, I questioned things. I was not, just complying with the rules. I always questioned the fairness of things and the justice of things. So there was a lot of that. I didn't just go along and get along. A part of it was that, I didn't think some things were fair, and I would stand up to certain things. And sometimes as a child, as a kid, you're correct, but sometimes you're wrong, and so, but it is what it is, and that's the personality that I had, and I guess I still have to some extent, because sometimes right and wrong is clear, and sometimes it's a matter of how you see things. People may see things differently.
At any time, did any of the teachers at that school made a case for you, seeing your potential and making a case for you to remain in the school?
No, quite the opposite. They all wanted to get rid of me because, I felt like, they put their heads together, and when they pick out a student and they say that student is this, the other teacher will say yes, and the other one would find some fault with you, and all of a sudden, you're persona non grata in the school. So I felt I was genuinely not wanted. I remember my Spanish teacher, he was Mr. Cruz, and he made a comment to me, and he said, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because you're not going to end up being anything. And I said, well, at that point I said I want to be a pilot. He said, well, any fool can't be a pilot. You have to, I don't think you can even be a pilot. You can, and it was that kind of negative reinforcement, in that school, in that particular school. I had other teachers in other schools that felt very differently. And the schools that I'd come from up until that point, I felt, the teachers would understand me more, or we had a better rapport. But that particular school, that year was quite challenging.
Is it because you're too competitive, maybe a par to that of the other students, the white students in the school? Or is it because they just did not want you, that you were not learning at all?
No. I was learning, but at the time it was a time of my consciousness and awakening. You see, a lot of things were happening. You're talking about 1975, 1976, right? There's a lot of black consciousness issues around that time, yeah? And for me, I stopped that. One summer, I read the entire Encyclopedia of American History. I was an avid reader, and I was into consciousness and blackness and social justice. So I saw injustice everywhere, and I spoke about it. I brought it to people's attention, and people generally want you to get along and don't want you to bring these things to their attention, or always creating division, or always creating problems in the school, or at that time, whether it was the war in Angola or in Mozambique, or issues of revolution, the situation in Grenada and different things. There was so much stuff going on at that time in the United States, certainly with respect to social justice, and South Africa. That was huge to me, South Africa and Zimbabwe. And so for me, I was more interested in liberation of black people and social justice, and always had a very leftist worldview, and, would be called, a communist, because I always felt, that there's just so much injustice, And so that was what, it wasn't because I wasn't learning, my head wasn't hard. I got the subjects, but I just would not comply to the rules. And at that time, it was a white-dominated school, and the whole culture and the vibe was white, and I just didn't feel I belonged there. I just didn't feel comfortable there, and I let them know that I didn't feel comfortable.
In that consciousness, Sam, did you at any given time felt the yard, meaning that you would have seen the police officers coming for those aliens, and now that you are in high school and some of the experiences that you're having, did you ever felt the yard during that period?
No, because our conditions had changed. When I was in the 7th grade, we moved from Grove Place to a new subdivision called Strawberry Hill, and the island was expanding housing, affordable housing, and my dad bought a 3-bedroom house, and and at that time there was no alien sweeps. The laws had changed. Aliens had, many people had been regularized. Everybody got their permanent residency, and you didn't have those issues at the time where aliens were coming for people at the time. So that whole, the native versus alien thing was not an issue for me in my consciousness, because I just saw black people, and I was in alignment with the native black boys, fighting against or talking or discussing at that time Bob Marley. It was just a time of awakening of black consciousness for me, and so that was. Yeah.
Now you found yourself going to another school. Was it private?
It was a parochial school, so it was an Anglican school.
Now that you're into a church school.
Well, it was church school in name only, because I'll clarify that, because it wasn't a holy school. It wasn't like Catholic school with any rules like that. Mm-hmm. It was a school owned by the Anglican Church, but the teachers, everything was very liberal, and there was no religious education in the school. It was a parochial school, but effectively just a local private school. Mostly local black people from the Virgin Islands went there.
Now that you're in a new school, what's your new concept of life? What are you now looking for?
Well, I felt much more comfortable in that environment, and got into the sports again. I love sports, basketball, football, and with the boys, and there were lots of political discussions at the time and things like that, and in your circle, get a little wider, and you meet people from, and then you start to like the girls, and so you get on the things. But so the basketball court was really huge. So in the 9th grade, I played a lot of basketball, football, whatever sports, and I was known around the school, and I was also a pretty decent student. I was on the dean's list, but I wasn't maybe as good even as I could be, because I wasn't too into the grades, but I was, well respected for my knowledge, whether it's social studies or whatever. Even the teachers sometimes would defer to me on discussions on current events, because I was well up to speed. I listened to the news every day. I read the news. So any discussion on current events, on history or political thought, etc., I was at least as knowledgeable as the teachers at the time. So that was the awakening that happened between 8th and 9th grade. I told you I read the Encyclopedia of American History. I listened to BBC News, listened to all day long. It was just world news, knowledge of the world, and I was very passionate about international affairs and international news during that time.
Your other siblings at that time, how were they doing, especially your first brother?
He was a normal kid, and he was a good person. So he was a very good student, and he was getting ready. He worked at a grocery store called Pueblo from 11th and 12th grade in after school to help, because at that time that's what we did. And so he was working. He was very much into church. He played the piano in church. He played the guitar. He liked music. He was great in mathematics and the sciences. He was very much a community leader among the young people of the church. We still went to Sonia Baptist Church, and that was very much like school. That was as much my community as school, so it was always going to church in that church community. And he was very much a youth leader in the church, and he led my brother that was younger than I. He was making his own way into his level of consciousness. So we all kind of, our personalities started to differentiate and to show.
No, your mom at that time would have been the person, while the dad might be working, your mom at that time would be the one raising the children. And what kind of impression that your mom would have created on you while at school? Well, to stay in school, to do the things that the teachers are asking. What kind of impression that she created?
Well, my mom worked at a watch factory. So all when I went through school, she was working. So she wasn't a stay-at-home mom at the time, because they needed a 2 income. So she had to go to work. We had to come home. If it's chicken, you clean the chicken and you season it, and this one cooked one day, this one did the dishes and so on. But she didn't have to tell us to stay in school. She didn't even have to tell us to study because you kind of knew you had to do it. The expectation was there. And my older brother would lead the way, and everyone kind of followed. Well, I wasn't the most studious person. I read a lot on my own, read my own stuff. My other brother, we kind of did our homework, but it was sort of the pattern had been set when we were younger, and you just kind of followed that pattern, and you know what you had to do. The thought of us getting in trouble with the law was not even to come into the picture, because first of all, with our family, with the church, and with all that stuff, we were not. It was not a matter of us getting into lawless or illegal behavior. So and everyone kind of understood. And as we got a little older, we saw education as the way to wherever we wanted to get to. And my older brother was going to go and be a doctor, which he ended up doing. I was going to go and be a lawyer because the older one is a doctor, the second one is a lawyer. And part of my, debating skills and et cetera was kind of moving in that direction, kind of radical thinking and philosophy and so on. And the one after me, he was into the science, so he was going to be a chemist, and then the other one was going to be an accountant. So we all kind of found our career kind of groove and niche, as we went on. But yeah, so my brother in high school, he graduated and he went to Florida to university. And then I went to the 10th grade. And going into the 10th grade, I know he had given up his job, bagging groceries at the grocery store at Pueblo. So I went to the human resource manager at the time, personnel manager, and I told him that I would like to get my brother's job, and he said, well, your brother worked really hard, but it doesn't work like that because, this is a big grocery store and I've hired other people, and you would have to fill out an application. And you'd have to wait until we call you. That's the way the system works. So I didn't know. So he gave me the application form, which I filled out, and I gave it back to him. And maybe about an hour later, he came out from his office and he looked at the front desk and he looked at the cashing area in him because maybe there were about 12 registers. It's a big grocery store. And here I was bagging groceries with my tie on, and he talked to the supervisor, and they talked a little while, and then they came to me, and he said, Raphael, I don't think you understood what I said. I said that you can't work now. I will, you need to apply, and I'll call you when I'm ready. I said, I heard exactly what you said, sir. So I'm not working right now, but I'm just practicing, and doing this. I know I'm not getting paid so that, when you call me, I'll kind of know how to do the job. So I'm just, practicing working. I know I'm not getting paid. And the gentlemen looked at each other, they shook their head, and he said, come. And he brought me in his office, signed my form, and I was employed that day. And these little things, the perseverance. I knew in life, if you persevere, if you push, and you don't back down, you'll get, what you're striving for. And I knew he was going to hire me. And so I started bagging groceries. I got my first check the end of the second week for $52. I was getting $2 and something an hour, and that was big money. But I also realized that there were some of the customers that gave you a tip if you bag the groceries well, if they like you, or if you're nice to them or whatever. And then I got into the tipping thing. So I opened an account at Chase Bank in the same mall, and deposited my $52 that day. In the account, they gave me a bank book. It's not like today when you go to the bank and they tell you go and get your mother's, whatever, grandmother's from whatever, and your birth this and your water bill and whatever. They just opened the account right away. So I put my $52, went back, and then I started hustling my tips on the side, So I had enough little tip money to, to check my chicks, and buy a little something and to move, And I always got that paycheck, and that paycheck always went uncashed into the bank. So I worked for 3 years in high school, 3 years, Cecil, and I never cashed a check. Every dollar went in savings. And people say, you ask how, the accumulation of wealth at the time, it was set from way back then.
Would someone say that you were selfish because you said that your big brother would have gone out there to work to help mom?
No. Not at that point.
Okay.
When we washed and scrubbed, that was for mom. When we went to work, that was for money for us to go to university.
Okay.
And so that money was put aside to go to university.
Okay.
So his money, he saved it. She never checked the bank account. The assumption was you're going to work because you have to help yourself. She's not going to baby you. She doesn't have any money for you to go to university. Try to get scholarships. Try to get loans. At that time, it wasn't like now, that everybody can get a scholarship and you go to the government and they give you that. You had to get loans. You had to struggle. You had to put whatever you had towards your university education. And my parents, with the kids they had and so on, if my dad gave you $500 to put towards that was a lot. So you had to come up with the rest. So we had to save our money. So I learned to save everything so that I can get my money when I was ready to go to university, to pay for my university, and this is what I did.
So, Sam, at what time of your high school life that you determined what you wanted to do and what you decided that you were going to do?
Well, I decided at some point, because I was interested in politics and so on, I wanted to study international studies, and eventually, because in the U.S. you get your bachelorette in a discipline, I wanted to go to Washington and do international studies and then do international law and join the U.S. Diplomatic Corps. That's what I decided I want to do. And at some point in high school, I made that decision.
Eventually, what was your final decision?
Eventually, that's what I decided to do.
I understood that you were a pilot.
No.
You were never?
No.
Okay.
I went to, I had an airline, but I can fly an airplane, but I'm not
I
a
only
pilot.
asked because you said earlier on that somewhere along you think that you would have been a pilot. When asked, I think you said.
Right. I told my middle school teacher that I wanted to be a pilot at that time. But by the time I got to high school, I was at the point where I decided I really liked this political, ideological thing, and that I was going to make my mark in the international world as a diplomat.
Oh, how much did the YAD, how much did the LACO inspired you to be that person that you wanted to be?
Certainly it came from there, but along with other influences, but certainly I think it's there from the foundation. Much of what you do specifically, the career, I didn't follow that career path because I'm not a diplomat now. I studied, but I didn't go. So, but your foundation comes from the yard. Your foundation comes from a long time. All of those little nuances you learn as a child, all of those values you learn as a child, they help shape you into what you are. But your specific career, what you decide to do, that's a career, and that can change. Even now my career can change or your career can change, but your core, who you are, doesn't change. And that comes from, a lot of that comes from the well of your early childhood.
Tell us a little bit more of the fact that you were able to drive yourself and your brothers, you all both were able to drive yourselves to do that extra bobber job, as we say here, in reference to the uniforms that you would have washed and ironed. How much of that influenced you to work hard?
Well, I would say getting up, seeing my dad, who worked in the oil refinery, working shifts, getting up and going to work every day. Seeing my mother get up and go to work every day. It became an expectation. And the only way you can get somewhere is if you work hard, if you save, if you do some of the fundamental things, make investments like my dad, bought the house and so on and so forth, and sort of to grow your wealth, and that's, you kind of had to do it. You had to put in the time. And I learned early on that you had to make a lot of sacrifices, defer gratification. It's not when I could have certainly taken my $52 and could have had a good time with it. My parents wouldn't even know because they never told me go to the bank, but I knew. So it's sort of, the expectation is set, and you now, listen, it's your life, you're expected to, and you deliver. We weren't left alone also because, my parents were always seeking to improve themselves. My dad didn't pursue too much higher education, but my mom did. And, she made up for what she lost. So after she got that 8th grade certificate, when by the time I got to university, she still had some younger ones at home that were helping her, with the math and some of these things. She did night school to study for her high school GED, and she completed her high school GED. My brother Isaac, my younger brother, he was her math teacher. He was born in St. Croix. And I remember the excitement, when she called me. I was in Washington when she completed the GED. She was so proud, and we were so proud of her. And she kept pushing. And she went on to the University of the Virgin Islands at night. And she worked. Sometimes she assisted me with my business. By that time, I was already in business. She worked in my business. And she went to UVI, always going to UVI, until she graduated. And my mother was 65 years old when she graduated from the University of the Virgin Islands with her degree in early childhood education, and started working, but she was working at the curriculum center, and working for me at the time. So she led by example. She led by example. My older brother led by example, and those around me led by example. So I felt, I wasn't the most motivated of the group. I just basically, did what they did. And I guess I motivated those behind me because, her 7 boys all went to university. But that was an expectation that there was, and there was nothing given to us. You had to work hard for everything, and so that just became sort of a natural thing in our household.
No, Sam. What about the fact of your father now having to lose his job, as you said, from the oil refinery? What propelled him now to remain in St. Croix? Sorry.
Yeah, so he when I was at university, they made an adjustment, and he lost his big job, but there were other things that he could do, and he worked for a contractor there and did other things. So he was always gainfully employed, and up until he was reached a good age. So he was stable, and he had sufficient money, and the parents always had enough because they kind of structured their lives and their savings. And so there was, between my parents, there was never an issue of, say, a shortage of money. That was never an issue because there was, enough balance. So my dad, again, he worked at the refinery up until sometime around in the early 80s, around 1981 probably, or 82, as a direct employee, and then he went on and worked for a contractor that was doing work in the refinery for some time after. And he had supervisory skills, so they would hire him as a foreperson or a supervisor, and he did quite a bit of that for some time.
No, Sam, I also would like to find out on the educational path, from high school into college?
You call it
into university?
Well, in the U.S. system, the college and university is
equal.
Right.
Yes.
So a university is made up of colleges. So it's that you don't have the 2 last years like we have, where you go to, college. So went to American University, which is in Washington, D.C., to study international studies. And I studied, and I had a good time. At the same time, I got a little distracted. I got distracted on the social front sometimes, maybe a little too much, like most young people do when they go to university. And I got distracted on the more serious political front, because at the time when I went to university, a few things were happening. Certainly the South Africa situation was forefront in my mind, so I got very much involved in the anti-apartheid movement in D.C. and really got swept up with that. So I would go to universities in New York and in Boston and many places. We had a divestment movement where we would mobilize students to protest against their universities having investments in South Africa or against companies in South Africa. I got very involved with the African National Congress, and I was a fundraiser for the African National. I would organize reggae concerts and things, lead those things in Washington, D.C. at the time, to raise funds for the African National Congress and do things on campus, social justice related things. So I really got into social justice. And in 1980, there was a big sea change because Ronald Reagan became president. Jimmy Carter was promoting human rights and, social justice globally, at least as much as he could. And we were in a liberal city in Washington on a liberal campus, and we didn't expect the American, electorate to swing and to send us Reagan. That was really, in effect, supporting the apartheid regime in South Africa. And I was not going to be a diplomat for the Reagan racist, regime to support South Africa. So I decided that at that point that I was going to change course. And that's why I decided, I no longer want to be a diplomat and just have to represent someone's interests. I want to change the world.
Did by any chance Ronald Reagan surprised you with his international understanding of the world stage?
Not at all. I thought the Reagan regime was reactionary at the time, whether domestically in the United States or outside. And it's not certainly the international. I'm not 100% ideological, whether you call it liberal or conservative. I find my views kind of all over the place because I don't, believe in locking an orthodoxy. You may have an issue with housing. Is it really supporting the empowerment of the people? So I always ask second or third or fourth questions. That's my thing. But in terms of Reagan's foreign policy, I just thought that it was going back, the old cowboy-style American approach where you dominate the world, and I didn't think it was something that would help, the people of the Caribbean or the people of Africa, and those are the people that I was most concerned with, especially those in the apartheid regime in South Africa.
Would you agree with me then? His vice president at the time, Bush Senior, and himself, president, would have started the process of the breaking down of communism and the liberalization of South Africa, and having Mr. Mandela freed from prison?
Absolutely not. They were quite comfortable, and they felt that the apartheid regime was a guardrail against communism, and that the ANC represented communism. Even in the Zimbabwe situation, the Rhodesia Zimbabwe situation, that they felt that the Patriotic Front.
Speak up because I need to.
Yeah, they felt that the Patriotic Front really they felt that all of these the whole Vietnam thing, it was all a fight against communism, and those people just needed national liberation, and they saw it as against the interest of U.S. corporate interests globally, and so that's their interest was U.S. corporate interests and protecting that, and my interest was in social justice and empowerment of people. So we were not in alignment, and so I didn't think, at that time that supporting the U.S. foreign policy was something that I wanted to dedicate my life towards.
And do you believe that while you're saying that it's factual, but at the same time we saw that the Americans gave Ronald Reagan 2 terms, and they also voted his vice president as president.
Correct. So
they had 3 terms.
So the country went collectively through the electoral process, moved to the right in that direction, and my thinking was to the left. So it wasn't a time for black empowerment or black economic empowerment. Those weren't the issues at the time of the Reagan administration. And I felt that I was more in tune with that. So I was not, was not going to dedicate my life and my service to promoting that, And so that was, that's where we parted ways. And I then decided to get into business. And I felt, the only place you could really control your destiny was as an entrepreneur in business, because those who have the gold make the rules. That's the main golden rule. And you need, all the nice white kids that are demonstrating with you in Washington, D.C., they're going to go home and daddy's going to give them a job at the car dealership, and they're going to be just like Ronald Reagan, because at the end, fish go with fish and fowl go with fowl, and you're going to be out there, always protesting. And so I figured, black people really need to start owning things and start being at the economic table, and that's what drove me actually to get into business. I entered business from a perspective of social justice, which is highly unusual because people may get into business to make money or get into business. I was very interested in protecting the environment, and that was important to me because, from early on from the yard, I learned going to St. John camping, etc. I wanted to protect and preserve the environment. I felt that, we needed to have an underground railroad. And that's, the chains are no longer physical, but economic chains. And how do black people get out of this, of having to be dependent on other people? How do Caribbean people get out? We have these industries in the Caribbean, tourism, etc. We don't own any of them. We need to start owning to start creating some models for those that follow. So that's sort of what that has driven me to entrepreneurship.
You were in a private school, high school in St. Croix, and you were being considered to be rebellious if your ideology. You left and you're now in university in Washington.
Correct.
Now, what is the difference between what you would have done in St. Croix, showing your consciousness, versus what you would have done in Washington, D.C., literally fighting for the liberation of South Africa and many other oppressed and depressed countries?
Well, you're younger in high school, and you got to come home at certain time at night. You got boundaries more so. When you on your own in university in a city, you get all types. So you can surround yourself with your cohorts, and you guys can have study groups, and you can get really involved in these clubs and organizations. You can even form organizations. I was one of the founding members of the African Student Association at American University, because at that time we had what was the Black Student Union, and I felt, and some of us felt, they were interested in partying too much, and we need to talk about and act on the global level, So we got to that. So it was that dialogue, but at university, you got to get into the game and to feel you're making a difference, and to get out there and to really protest and I remember I got near arrested in Washington D.C. At a protest that turned violent because we had the ambassador from South Africa that came to our university. It was a major university on international studies, and he came to speak, and they wanted to have a debate, and we felt that, they should not be allowed, and our focus should be on making South Africa ungovernable and destroying that apartheid regime, breaking the fabric of apartheid. So really got into the radical stuff, and so that the university environment was more conducive to really acting, to really being a player in the struggle in Washington, D.C. at the time. I got to go to Congress, I got to meet Congress people, I got to go to the embassies, and, whether the Libyan embassy, everything was right there in Washington. You could really, you really felt like you're where the decisions are being made, and where action was happening. So that was a very interesting time for me academically, yeah?
Your focus now is business.
Mm-hmm.
You said what inspired you to get into business. Any regrets while at university that you decided that you're going to do business?
Not at all. 1,000%. I feel, it's changed organically, but I feel that, I did get to make a mark in the things I wanted to, doing what I've done. I'm glad everything happened as it did now, looking back, because I feel I've made a difference. As the architect, I didn't have the perfect drawing of where I would be today and how it would end up. But on reflection, I would say that I feel that the canvas was well covered. And part of it was organically, me segueing from, being this international lawyer and in diplomacy, trying to change the world that way, to being an actor in the economic struggle, trying to come to Dominica, come to the Caribbean, set up businesses, do things in a more sustainable way. You create a model, a replicable model for for tourism development and small island states, and being in that space. This to me, I feel pretty good as having the opportunity, the privilege to be able to live that life and make that contribution.
How long after university that you returned back to St. Croix?
So after university, I was well on my way, and then a little one popped out, a child, my first child. So I got responsibility for myself when I was in university. So my girlfriend got pregnant, and I had to start working. So I did less of school and more of work. And then at that point, I got a nice job, but I wasn't satisfied. And I had the opportunity, I told the people where I worked in Northern Virginia that I would like to clean the buildings. I learned how to clean at home. I know they were having problems with a cleaning contractor, and I wanted the contract to clean the building. I want to start business on my own and not just work for them. I had a child to take care of, and at that time I had a family to take care of. And they said, well, we can't have you work and clean the building. So you're a good worker. Why don't you just stick with us? We have plans for you. The company was Media General Cable. I said, well, you don't think I do a good job cleaning? They said, not that. I think you do a great job cleaning, but, you're better off. And I said, no, I really want to quit this job, and I want to get the contract to clean the building, because I realized at the time, a job is a job. I wanted to take the risk and get out there and get into, even if it's, something like cleaning. So I gave up the job, traded a mop and a bucket for my tie and going into the office. And I remember there was some shock and consternation with my coworkers, especially the black ones, because they felt he was, on track. He was even treated like a supervisor of some kind. And there he is going back and cleaning toilets and whatever. But for me, I saw it differently. I saw that I was going to get this contract, and then I was going to get another contract, and I was going to, become a cleaning mogul, sort of, And so that started my career in business. My first business was a cleaning company in Washington, D.C.
And from there, where did you walk to?
Well, I got a bus, a van, an enclosed bus, and I also got a carpet cleaning thing, and I'm calling the carpet to have someone call to make appointments, and got some people to work, and then it became very difficult, and I had some incidents where the workers wouldn't show up to work, and this is not Dominica where every day you may get a little rain or something. This is where winter, the hawk bites in Washington, D.C. You're freezing, you have to go clean the building. It doesn't matter, and then sometimes your workers don't show up. You have to find yourself all the way down 1 hour away from your house and cleaning a building. So it became very, very difficult. And I remember, there was one dramatic incident in Washington where, in Northern Virginia, I pulled up with my van because I learned my employees didn't show up. And that was probably our final warning, and I didn't want to lose the contract and so on. So I drove all the way down Route 50 from Washington, D.C., all the way down to Northern Virginia. That time, D.C. wasn't as cosmopolitan as it is now. So a black man driving in that van, you have to be very careful. I got down to Media General. I went to open the building to clean that building by myself, which would have taken me up until morning probably. So I was moving, and I saw all these lights, at me, get down on your knees, hands on your head. The entire Chantilly Police Department was following me, and they thought I came with a van, to steal the TV and equipment from Media General. And I had my Black Lives Matter moment in the winter, kneeling with lights in my face with the police, get down, and I felt like it was hours that they had me, because they had to do an investigation, because they really were convinced that I was coming to steal, and that I was there. I stole the key, and I was coming there. And they called, and it was in the middle of the night. They finally got the director of operations from Media General that, verified that I am who I am, and I'm authorized to be there, and please, enable me to do my work. And they basically just said, well, I fit the description of someone that had been burglarizing the area, and they left. But during that time, it was so cold. I felt I needed to pee. I couldn't even go to the bathroom. I felt I was going to pee myself. I was just so, and Cecil, for a long time, I never mentioned this story to anyone because of the humiliation. You lay there, and all I said is, if I ever get up from here, I'm getting on a plane and I'm getting out of America. And that's the last time I lived. Within 2 weeks, I was gone. I left my van, I parked it up, I sold the contract, someone wanted to buy it, and I just took off and left Washington, D.C. and went back to the Virgin Islands because of that incident. I figured, I didn't want to get that close, so I felt they were going to kill me. I just felt, the hostility. You could feel that open resentment and hostility. And I
felt South Africa?
Yeah, I felt South Africa in Chantilly, Virginia. Yeah, powerless. That sense of powerlessness. Yeah, I decided, in the Caribbean, I'm the last one the police would think that I'd like be the nerdiest thief, looking at you, but in America at the time, and certainly now, a young black man is viewed as a criminal, regardless, and so I had my experience there, and I decided that was enough. I mean, there had been other experiences where a police would follow you, stop you, it just too much of that constant. And I felt I wanted to live in a society where, my race wouldn't be such, I wouldn't feel the weight, of the society on me so directly.
Back to St. Croix, What was your first duty on return?
On return, my first duty was to clean the cistern in my mother's house. So a cistern, for those people who don't know, most people probably know, in the Virgin Islands, you have a water catchment system. We don't have rivers or these things, So every house has to be built with a cistern under the house. And so your rainwater would be caught in your cistern. You have a pump, you pump the water, and that's how you use your water. If your cistern run dry, you call the water truck and they fill it up. You make sure your cistern don't run dry because it costs money. And so we maintained our cistern. And something must have died on the roof and got in the cistern, and my mother's cistern was smelling. Tried to call a cistern cleaning company, and there was none. And so I had to go rent some pumps from Reliable Rental and get down in the cistern, empty it out, flush it out, clean it out, and coat the walls. And thus a business was born. So I said, no one cleaning cisterns. Maybe I should get in the cistern cleaning business. And that was a niche that was there, and I did that. I had gotten a little money from selling a contract in Washington, D.C. for my cleaning contracts. And I took $3,000 and put towards a plot of land. And someone was asking for $12,000. This was around 83, 83, 84. So some time ago, it was a very nice, comfortable neighborhood. I was a kid at that time. I was born 61. So what do I be, 22, 23 years old? And I bought my first piece of land. It was $11,000 I negotiated, $3,000 down. I'm paying the rest monthly for 3 years. And I'm a proud guy. I cut the grass. I make sure it looked clean and nice. And I'm, showing my land to everybody because now I have land, This is it. This is power. And I've got my cistern cleaning business. I'm advertising in a newspaper, trying to get hustle. I got a couple guys working. And, one job. We really didn't have any stability. It was kind of crazy, I'm thinking now. But back then it was sort of natural. I was taking risk. And I was out there with my pickup every day. Someone would call. This one would call. I really wouldn't know Friday where I'd get money to pay my guys from. But we were on the hustle. So I had my cistern cleaning business. And I'm paying off my land. And those two things led me in different directions in business. So with respect to the land, about maybe 6-7 months later, someone, I was showing my land to everyone. So a friend told a friend. She was a lawyer, and this guy wanted to see my land. He was living in New York, and he came. He was actually a Dominican guy. And he came to see my land, and, it's so nice, it's so nice. And he asked me how much I want for it. I said, no. Sir, I don't know what, our mutual friend told you, but it's not for sale. I don't know. I'm just showing it to you. I said, maybe she told you that maybe there was another one in the area which I don't know of, but this one is definitely not for sale. And we went back and forth a little, and he said, I don't know why I came out here. And anyway, at the end he said, okay, well, I'll give you $25,000 cash for it right now. And I realized it was for sale. I just hadn't realized it at the time, you know. And so, of course, I took the $25,000 and I paid off the balance on it. And I was good. I had probably at the time $16,000, $17,000 cash on. And then I bought 2 more lots and sold that and subdivided and started. And within 10 years, you realize I had become the largest local real estate developer in the Virgin Islands, yeah. And within 10 years, I had bought a whole estate of 150 acres over the same golf course. So I was buying this thing and doing deals and turning it over, and I realized that I had a knack for that, you know, and an eye for certain things in real estate development, and had done really, really well. And at the same time, I said the cistern cleaning business, well, you know, the public housing communities, they had a pandemic of typhoid, and the federal government needed all the cisterns cleaned right away. And guess who was the cistern cleaning company on the island? That was me. And so there were millions of dollars of contracts of cistern cleaning, and I got to doing that, got subs, and so my business just took off within 10 years in all kinds of directions, both real estate development and cistern. I got into construction, I got into other development, and you fast forward by the early 90s, I had become, you would have to say, quite successful. Hurricane Hugo hit in '89. At that time, I had, I saved my money. I live a simple life. I invest, and so I was cash rich, and I was able to pick up a lot of deals. People collected their insurance, and they just want to get off the island. And so if you're patient, you know, they'll take this for the house, that. So I started buying real estate and offering people, you know, that wanted to leave, you know, an opportunity for them to cash out. And I had all these holdings, and within 6 months, a year, people were then seeking to buy back.
Just thinking of what you're saying, Sam, tells me that your yard started way back in Dominica. The things that you did propelled you to continue with that braveness, that astuteness to achieve. You get into St. Croix, that did not end. You got your first little job, and you took your $52 as a means to save, and not knowing that it was really going to propel you into business, and to have that understanding by saving your monies, it would help in the long process, and that's what you have done. And just thinking of just Dominica way back in the 60s before you left into St. Croix.
Well, you're absolutely correct. And even in the 50s, because before I was born, my grandmother, when she moved back to Bellevue, she opened a bakery there. And so she became the bakery of the village. And my mother, when she had to quit school, you know, at age 11, 12, she did her chores, but she did gardening around the yard. And she saved her vegetable money. She would give it to people going to town. And eventually she had money by the time she was 12 years old to buy a Singer sewing machine. And she became the seamstress of Bellevue at that time. So my foundation is not me in the yard. My foundation came generations before the women in the yard and their strength. And it's their shoulders that I was able to stand on. And I gave you the story of my mother and her education, her persistence. At age 65, she graduates from university. That's something that, you know, for me, everything that I've done pales in comparison to what these women, because what you do is not the final outcome of what you achieve, but where you came from to where you got to in all measures. And as far as I'm concerned, they have certainly been more successful than I can ever be or than I am. I may have more money than they had, but money is just cash flow. That's not really wealth. The wealth is what is in you, you know, the capacity that is in you. Money is cash flow. If you if someone gives you you're not $1 million, you're not a millionaire because you can lose it in any day. But if you have the capacity to earn it, you are a millionaire, whether or not you have that money. So money is just something that is transient, is cash flow passing through. Your capacity is that's important.
Someone is on the line. I can take the calls now, so you can call in now. Good evening to you, caller.
Hi, Cecile.
Hi.
Yes, this is a very interesting program. Hi, Mr. Raphael.
Good day. How are you?
I am good, thank you. I have a question for you. I heard you talking about your experiences, in Washington. From the time that you left to now, how do you compare things among blacks and white people? Are they the same? Have they been better? What do you think?
Well, they are the same and they're better, and it's no contradiction, the two. Certainly, the social conditions in the United States have much improved for black people, where you have, when I was there, I couldn't imagine the concept of a black man being president of the United States, and we had Obama as president. But, it may be a person, but the same social structure that existed then, I think that still remains. The lack of power, the lack of economic power that the black people in the United States have, that remains the same, and that I think is most troubling. You see, so it's not just a political face or the police. You still have some of the same things, but they may be more cautious now because they may think you have a camera. I didn't have a camera. They could have shot me right there and said that I tried to do whatever it is. So there was very little recourse. There's much more now. There are more opportunities now for black people, but at the same time, in terms of the community, you have the challenges of another or two more generations of entrenched social poverty. And when I say poverty, I don't mean a lack of cash flow, but just the sense of a community not being able to, economic chains, social chains. I think that's two more generations entrenched. And so this, I think, is even worse than it was before.
So you find yourself doing well in St. Croix amidst the challenges that you would have encountered, but you find yourself doing well financially. Your company is starting to grow. At what period did you felt that you had to come back to Dominica?
Well, I didn't feel that at the time. Again, everything in my life just unfolds. So I didn't consciously say, I'm going to get up and move to Dominica, in 1995. That's when it started happening, 1995, 1996. So I was doing well. I was investing. I was, got into things. In my golf club course, and I'm doing all kinds of interesting things, making investments, in other places, and had a very comfortable life. I've got, great real estate I've purchased, and so, but there was still a void. And again, two things happened at the time. One, I remember listening to a radio program. We have those now, where the host, he was a black nationalist, and he would speak about the situation that black people face and the challenges. And one day he got up, and for whatever reason, he complained, that we don't have enough economic power, and I agree with that. But he said, why don't we get at least the concessions to sell liquor and alcohol and cigarettes and stuff? Because we as black people, we cannot own the hotels and we cannot own the airlines. So at least we can own a little shop to sell these things. And I took exception to that, not just for myself, but I figured I had kids.
You want to just hold that thought? Just let us take a telephone call. Good evening to you, caller.
Yeah, Sam Raphael.
Yes.
Obama wasn't the first president of the United States. First black president. John Henderson was the first black president in 1781. John Henderson. Okay, so Obama wasn't the first black president.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sam. We are not going to argue that. We are not going to argue that. That's a concept. That is a belief. I don't think I want us to argue beliefs.
Right.
Yeah.
So two things. So the host said that black people cannot own hotels and airlines in the Caribbean. And I felt that, maybe we don't, but you don't put that energy out there so that the next generation would not even seek to own a hotel, because can't mean that we shouldn't even attempt to. And so I called him on the program, called him out. He knew who I was. I was fairly well known. And I said to him, I don't want you saying that. That's not right to say to the next generation. I got kids out there and you got kids, and we can't be putting out that kind of energy out there because they can. He said, how do you mean they can? I said, well, and eventually we went back and forth. He said, if a black man owned a hotel, you think white people would come to it? Of course not. Don't be stupid. If you didn't. And he went, and I said, well, I don't necessarily agree with that. So he asked me two fundamental questions. He said, do you own a hotel? I said, no. He said, do you own an airline? I said, no. He said, then shut up and call me when you own a hotel and an airline. Bam! He hung up the phone. Cecil, that man has helped motivate me to develop Jungle Bay. Because if you tell me I can't do it, and I see that it can be done, and you're telling the very people that him and I are trying to help, and he had good intentions when he was saying that. I got where he was coming from, but we see it differently. So I was going to prove that it can be done. And I had always in the back of my mind thought about doing this type of development. Even in St. Croix, I had started doing this thing, Sea Farm Park, and then Hurricane Hugo hit, and it was something to do with hospitality too, and so on. And at the same time, in 1995, there was a regime change in Dominica as a result of the collapse of the banana trade, which I think helped precipitate that change, and you had a new regime in office. And at that time, the then president of the legislature, who I was close buddies with David Jones, and the managing director of Merrill Lynch, we were all friends. Merrill Lynch wanted to manage the Social Security funds of Dominica, and the actuaries looked at the fund and they felt, they wanted to manage the Social Security funds of the Caribbean states, and they didn't have a window in. So they felt that there's this new government in Dominica. If they could move in there and at least manage the funds, and do well, then the other islands would let them manage their fund, and that would be lucrative for Merrill Lynch. That's a financial brokerage firm. And they did their homework, and they found that Dominica got an average of 3.1% return, and if Merrill Lynch was managing over the past 5 years, it would be 7%, and so on. So they needed someone to come and meet this new untested government to get them to have Merrill Lynch manage the fund. And I thought that was good for the government of Dominica, more money for their development. So this is all good. No one gets hurt. So I got on a plane and I came down with a nice letter from the legislature, the Virgin Islands, the president, congratulating this new prime minister and requesting a meeting, with Merrill Lynch and with them to discuss this matter. And I met the new prime minister, and and he didn't. I knocked on his door, and someone introduced us, and Mr. James, and I got him this nice letter, and he looked at it. He looked at me, and I guess, in retrospect, in his mind, he was like, "Who is this guy? Where did he come from? Is he a scam artist? What's going on? I've never heard anything about this guy. I don't know who he is." So he told me he'll have to call me back on it. Which he did. About 2-3 weeks later, he called me. Of course, he had done his due diligence and saw that I had done a few things in the Virgin Islands. I was fully legitimate, and he called me and he said, "I'd like you to come back to Dominica as soon as possible to meet with me and some members of my cabinet." So I called Ian Pringle. That time he had an aviation service, and he came to Dominica, and he flew on Wednesdays and Fridays and Sundays. So we flew down to Dominica on Wednesday with Ian, and I had an appointment on Thursday to meet the Prime Minister. So I brought my guys from Merrill Lynch and the President Legislature, and we walked into government. At that time, there was no financial center. We walked into government headquarters to meet the Prime Minister. That was big. We got an appointment. So I had done my job, and I walked in, and I expected him to get in with Merrill Lynch guys and to do their deal. I just did the intro. And he said, no, who are these guys? So I told him that's the managing director of Merrill Lynch. And he said, no. That part we can't do because the government, Social Security, need the funds because that's sort of, it has to stay local for whatever reason, I guess. And so I said, well, sort of why? So you told me to come anyway. He said, no, but and then he appealed to me. He said, that we need young people like you, Dominican people, to come back home. And I saw he was really earnest about that. And certainly they had been swept in the office and they didn't get the banana business back for the banana growers, that I guess and that expectation wasn't being met. And people maybe were feeling a little antsy, so they're trying to recruit Dominicans and direct foreign investors, anyone to come up and set a business. So he set up a business in Dominica. So I said, well, he said, what would you do? What business could you do in Dominica? I said, well, I had looked at doing a campground, and I have always an interest in a campground. They didn't quite understand it at that time. His Minister of Finance, some of the guys were there. I kind of explained the concept of a campground. How many people would you employ, you think? I said, I just picked a figure from this guy. I hadn't planned on this. So I said about 20 people maybe, when can you start? I said, no, it's not like that. I would need to get the right land. What kind of land do you need? These guys were pretty serious. There was a sense of urgency there. And I told them, maybe close to the ocean, not too close to Roseau, because these people don't want to come and do traditional tourism. Maybe close to a river, maybe closer to... And then the Minister of Finance then told me about this place in Point Milat. I'd never heard of this place. And he said, what are you doing tomorrow? Tomorrow was Friday. I said, well, I do. And he didn't even let me continue. He said, no, don't. I have an appointment for you. Let me call. He called the proprietor of the property in Point Milat and had an appointment. And 9 o'clock, meet her there at 9 o'clock. She'll meet you at the river. And the gentleman that was at that time driving me around, he knew how to get down to the White River. And the next day, my task was set. I had to go down to the White River and look at land for this woman that was waiting for me. He even got a price of the land that he told me how much he would charge, and I thought, okay, that was reasonable and so on. So I went down next day looking for land. And I got down to the White River. It was early, and I realized this woman had come out there way early in the morning and hired the local people, because they used to rent the land to local banana farmers, and the industry had collapsed and the land was left fallow. So she offered them a day's wage to put stones on the water so I can walk over the White River, and get on the other side so I can look at this land that she has, And went and looked at that land, and I wasn't too impressed because it was just a flat area right after the White River. And we went up a little, and I was not impressed. But I didn't want to disappoint the Prime Minister at the time. And, I wanted to seem, I was legitimate. I was serious. I figured, I'll just buy 5 acres based on the price they had told me. I can afford that. I'll just spring 5 acres. And I'll find someone to sell it to, and I'll be on my way, because this isn't exactly what I had in mind. And when I told her I'd take 5 acres, and I told her the price that the Minister of Finance told me, she said, no, that's not my price. And she told me a price that was twice as much. I said, no, that doesn't make any sense, because that's what he told me. If it was what you're telling me now, I wouldn't even be here. We wouldn't have the conversation. So we went back and forth, and I realized at that point, she's doing me a favor. I didn't have to buy this land. I could just get out of Dodge. I haven't disappointed anyone. The woman doubled the price on me. I can explain it to the guys when I got back to Roseau, and I'm on my way. So it was good. So I apologized to her. I said no hard feelings, and I'm heading back. And she said, what are you looking for? Cheap land? I said, yes, I'm looking for cheap land. And no offense there, but what you have isn't cheap. And so she said, I have cheap land. She said, in the back, it's called Zonzon. So in the back of Zonzon, wherever that is, I've got cheap land. And she told me the price, which was actually a quarter of what the government officials here, the Minister of Finance had told me. And I thought it didn't make sense. They say if it's too good to be true, then it's not. I felt something was wrong. But I had gone all the way out there, and I was going to look at it. The guy that drove me thought maybe I shouldn't, and he felt then compelled to walk with me. So 2 of us walked down to the coast, up the coast where she told me. We found a little track like where goats walk. We walked up the track, and we found our way, and we got into this valley. It was like the Garden of Eden. There was a stream running, fed by a spring, and that property to me was worth what she was asking for. But that property, from her perspective, was the wasteland of the estate. You see, it was right on the coast. They couldn't grow bananas there. And in the era of banana farming, you're thinking, what is banana farmland? That land was ideal for the type of development that I was interested in. So I was like, wow, oh my God. And I started to get goosebump, and the guy was kind of concerned that was with me because he didn't really know me. And there's this guy freaking out in the bush, and all he's seeing around him is bush, But I saw clearly that this was the place that this thing was supposed to happen. And I just told him, be quiet, because I didn't want this woman to up the price on the land because there was a discrepancy before. Went up front, talked to her. She said, okay. I said, but the only problem, ma'am, is, I don't think you have enough land there, so it doesn't make any sense. She said, what do you mean? I said, I don't really want 5 acres. I want 50 acres. She said, 50 acres? But I have more than that. More than that in there. She said, 50 acres, you have your checkbook? I said, don't insult me. I always have my checkbook, ma'am. She said, they didn't tell you I'm the registrar of titles for the island. I'm a lawyer. Today, give me a name. Give me a name. Give me an address to put on it. And she did a memorandum of sale. Got her father to sign it, and we didn't get the survey and the title work completed, but certainly the sale was done within a few hours. And I was down at her office, check in her hand, and I had become the proud owner of 50 acres. Eventually, by the time we got to the natural boundary, I bought the 55 acres actually, and that's the genesis of Jungle Bay. So it was sort of by default that I had looked at the time with some people from Social Security, because they also wanted me to look at an alternative at the Point Round property to develop a golf development, and I looked at that and did the assessment of that. And at the time, I felt, that may not be the most viable with the numbers that's required to maintain a golf course and so on. And so I decided to pursue my dream in Point Manhattan to develop Jungle Bay. At the time, my mother was quite concerned because in her world, she had moved me to paradise. America is, St. Croix was like one step away from the kingdom, from heaven. So here she moved me from Dominica, took me to St. Croix. I'm the toast of the town, largest local developer. Everyone knows Sam, and he's doing so well. And then I'm going to drop all of this and come back to Dominica. But the Dominica is the Dominica she knew and she remembered because of the hardship she faced in Dominica. Why would you do that? And so, she called me. She said, I need to talk to you. And I said, yes. She said, you're a big man. I know you'll make your decisions and so on. But I have to tell you this. When God delivered the children of Israel from Egypt, Sam, he didn't mean for them to go back, Why are you going back in that place? Because she felt people will be envious of you. You're doing so well here. Dominica is not like the U.S. People are different. But I felt, I just felt that the fulfillment would come from coming back to Dominica and doing this. I was financially well off. I was, probably had reached where I could go in my mind. There wasn't anything I needed to attain that I hadn't attained in St. Croix when I left. And I was in my early to mid 30s, had done very well early on. And I needed a new mountain to climb. And that's what Jungle Bay and Dominica did for me.
So now you have decided that you are going to be in Dominica. You have purchased some 55 acres of land. You have decided to build villas. Give us that experience.
So it took me about 5 years to transition from around 96 to the start of construction of 2000 and putting things in place, financing, everything for this deal. I didn't want to, of course, people think if you have money there, you take it and you build here. It doesn't. I bought the land, but I wanted to fund it from local sources. Aid Bank, they weren't interested in that, because it was not a proven concept. Even regionally, I couldn't get Caribbean Financial Service score out of EIB money. They liked the idea, but PricewaterhouseCoopers, the auditors felt the country risk factors of Dominica were too high. That's what they wrote in the report. DFL in Trinidad, Development Finance Limited, the same EIB funds, the same report from PricewaterhouseCoopers. So it was difficult to get. So it took years of trying.
So in a nice way that you were saying that Sam was a madman, endorsing what your mother was saying.
Yeah, well, they are correct because it's not a proven concept. And, you can't put good money after some guy's crazy ideas.
But you overcome.
Yes.
You did it.
Because it's me. So I have to figure it out. I have to prove the concept. Because, I can't ask you, Cecil, to give me your money to fulfill my crazy dream. Would you do that? No.
How I could take a chance. How did you eventually happen?
If it's your money, but again, it's not the banker's money. The banker's money is the depositor's money or EIB's money. Or that's why they had PricewaterhouseCoopers. They decided to take a chance, but their auditors is the one that have to do the backstopping, and they decided that was not a workable, that was not likely to be successful.
How were you able to convince the bankers?
I didn't. So at that time, the government had a citizenship by investment program, and I learned about that. I applied under the re-engineered citizenship by employment program, and I started to promote it. And the same acumen that I had developed from the yard, from whatever. You touch something, you're going to be successful at it. So I found ways where other people were struggling under that. I made connections, and I started to raise funds under the CBI program, the re-engineered program, to develop Jungle Bay. And I was on my way with that until the regime changed. So 2000, the government changed, and I had started to raise funds, and that's just when the ball was starting to roll for me, The government had just put up a new road in Point Milat, and so things were looking up, and then the government changed. And so I decided to, notwithstanding, and at that time Rosie came in, and he suspended the program. And suspended it, and, he had to work out what he had to, for whatever reasons. And I decided, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and start this project. And as I told my brother, even if I have to do it with a pickaxe and a machete in one hand, I'm going to just go ahead and start it, and what's that must finish. So I used got in there, and the CBI program, we started with that, and eventually the government changed the price on the program, tripled the cost for investment, and basically financing collapsed under the program. So I was able to raise some funds. There's much discussion about, the $6 million. I was able to raise that EC dollars under it, but that wasn't near sufficient to complete the project. And so I had started it. I then had to go out to the marketplace, meaning finding a source of funds. I used some of my funds, and then I raised some private equity to complete the original Jungle Bay, and that's how I was able to complete it. So it started under the CBI program, and it collapsed. The financing collapsed, and I had to find other ways and means to complete that project.
And you found that money, you had to go to the market. How convincing were the people in reference to your project and having to come to Dominica?
Well, again, the concept is, as you said, the typical person would buy into it. I have a proven track record as a business person, that goes a long way. The concept makes sense. That goes a long way. And if you believe in me, you can put your money in. And I found people basically that believed in me, and whatever means and how we got to convince them, I was able to raise funds through them, and whatever funds I decided to put in on my own, was able to raise the funds, sufficient funds to get it open. And we were able to open Jungle Bay in 2005, the original Jungle Bay.
And then your success story came along during the period of 2005-2018.
Right. For the original Jungle Bay, it came through from 2005 until 2015 for that Jungle Bay, because it was 10
2015,
years.
Tropical
Storm Erica hit in 2015. The first year we balanced things. Now I'm fast forwarding. It was not easy. I mean, there were so many adjustments that had to be made. The idea sounded good. The idea sounded good to the community. You're doing community tourism. You're going to buy their produce. You're going to do this and keep the money local and provide skills and it all sounded good, but the people just wanted a job, because poor people don't have the concept of long-term planning. And then the way in which they did things, people did work, the work day was not until 4 in the southeast. The workday was until 1 because you took care of bananas, you did what, you got up early, you had your big breakfast at 9, and then you work until 1, and then the workday is done. There's this crazy guy, Sam, with this crazy idea and saying, after lunch, you have to come and work in the afternoon. I had that difficult time motivating people, or people are not used to working every day. You have to come to work like a machine. So you want to take your, come 2 days and the next day you're off, you have enough cash, or even some of them wanted to get the cash at the end of the day. So it was a serious adjustment I had to make on that side. And the whole concept was to develop something using local labor, developing local capacity. It sounds really good, but it's very difficult. And it would have been easier for me to bring in foreign guest workers that are used to working a certain standard, a certain way. But I decided not to because, again, where I came from with this project, it was supposed to prove a concept and create a concept, notwithstanding the challenges that I was going to face.
So do you believe bringing in aliens, let's call it like that of St. Croix, bringing aliens into the new yard, do you think that you are actually affecting the well-being of the people who reside in the area of Dalis?
I don't have a clear yes and no black and white answer because these things are on the spectrum. But certainly, if you can, you should employ locally. If you can, you should keep the money circulating locally. And that's what Jungle Bay tried to do. So we try to buy from local farmers. We try to provide employment to local people as much as possible. Sometimes you can't find that capacity either in suppliers and so on, and you can't sacrifice the whole project. So you have to go beyond that. So you got to see and then sometimes the economics doesn't work or the skill capacity isn't there. So those are things that an employer and investor have to think about. The person on the ground doesn't look at it that way. We just want the jobs. Why are you, bringing in foreign people? Well, maybe you can't really do the job at the level at which the job needs to be done. But you don't know that you can't perform at the level that it needs to be done. You think you can. You don't know what you don't know. And not knowing what you don't know is a major problem in life because people always make assumptions and sometimes they're not right. And when you're the one holding the pot handle, sometimes you have to make some tough decisions. And in this case, I try to because this is sort of my second go around. I had done okay. So for me, this was something that I could sort of experiment on and really, with the social justice thing. And that's my orientation. And so for me, that was important. Somebody else coming to do it, they probably won't, be able, they don't have in their mind the consciousness. That's not the priority to do it. Or, the reality of these challenges, it may just be easier. It doesn't make sense. Why are you going to go through? And you've got an easier path to take and so on. And so sometimes it's not, it's not good to take the most difficult path because it's possible that I couldn't have gotten it done, So, but I took the risk and it worked out. So I'm very happy about that.
Anytime when you took that risk, you evaluate the millions that you were receiving from the United States government in St. Croix versus spending tens and maybe hundreds of thousands of US dollars into the economy of Dominica, that you feel that it doesn't worth it?
Well, for me personally, I needed to prove this. And not just for me personally, but I think it's bigger than myself. For the region, I needed to do this. And I remember the geotourism editor of National Geographic. I've always had a relationship with National Geographic, but the traveler, the geotourism editor, Jonathan Tuttle, and the guy that developed Maho Bay Campground, they came to see me when I had just started Jungle Bay. And it was like 2 white missionaries that came to tell me a simple message. And they said, you cannot afford to fail. And I didn't quite understand it at the time. But they meant there was too much riding on the success of this. Too far, too much. You have to make it happen. This is bigger than you. This is bigger than your pocketbook. This is bigger than your financial state. This is huge. You have to be successful so that others can follow you and you can be that shoulder that they can stand on. You can be that foundation. And now I understand that because the model that we've created, others on the island, other developers are replicating that. Now it's become the norm. 20, 25 years ago, this is not how the island was thinking the development should be. You should knock down these hills and build a casino and build a this and that. So we've proven, and not just me, but those talented people that have been on this ride with me, and many of them have been on the ride from Jump Street. I can't do Jungle Bay by myself. I have a talented team. That's the secret. You can't do anything by yourself unless you have a talented team. The talent you must have is being able to find the talent, convince them to come along, and keep them together. Because when you get talented people, sometimes you lose them. And so it was important. And now this weekend I head to St. Lucia. Friday, the tourism authority invited me there. They're flying me in to talk about sustainable tourism and how they can do it. I just came from Martinique, came from there. So I'm going all over the place, and especially in the Caribbean. For me, this is important because I want to share the concept of preserving the natural environment because we're losing our environment, yeah? And promote a type of tourism that is more people-centered. And so for me, it's a great success. It's a great ride, and that's the next step on this journey. I'm from all the way up top to I'm on 5 islands doing different things. I won't go into the details of some of what I'm involved in, but I'm in some serious investments throughout the Caribbean, and that's what I'm doing.
Sustainability, people,
and having fun doing it.
And having fun doing it. Tell the listeners some of the work that you would have done in the region, maybe countries in the region that you have seen from that of 2000 or 1996 when you first took that challenge, and every other person felt that was a crazy idea. Can you now tell us some of the countries in the region now that are thinking differently and are willing to work with you to make this thing work?
Well, I haven't done a Jungle Bay model elsewhere, and I don't want to do the same thing elsewhere. But I'm in other islands, doing other interesting things in affordable housing on one island, and I want to compartmentalize and keep them compartmentalized. So I don't want to go into the details of what I do. Some things I'm not in the lead on the ground, but I'm involved right now with serious development in 5 Caribbean islands, all along the lines of sustainability, some economic sustainability, all with a social justice theme, but all different, because for me it would be boring if I were to repeat, the same thing over and over. And every island calls for something that's a little different.
Where were you the night of Tropical Storm Erica?
I was in Denver, Colorado. My son had just gotten married that day. And that's 2015. And 2015 was a correction year for me. You know when the economists say correction? 2015 was a correction year. I had started Hummingbird Air in 2013, and I decided to start that because we had airlift issues, and I wanted to improve airlift issues, especially for my business. And then I got 3 airplanes and launched a full-fledged airline out of the U.S. Virgin Islands, Hummingbird Air. And I went to St. Lucia, Dominica, St. Kitts, Nevis, and even some charter flights and so on. And one of my airplanes, we had an aviation incident, we call it, but almost effectively a crash in Bermuda, because at the time I had gone to Bermuda to develop another property called Mystic Bay. And I had negotiated, everything was in place, financing, everything. And I was meeting with the Antigua government, but I had to meet with the Bermuda government because, they have 2 tiers government there. And so the Bermuda Council was at the point of reviewing and making a decision. It was favorably predisposed to support Mystic Bay, but we were flying in one of my airplanes, and the pilot landed in a very short runway. He landed a little short of the start of the runway, and there was a big gap in the concrete, and it ripped out the landing gear, the right landing gear, and we careened with the airplane on one side. And we walked out of there with my team of the airplane and went straight to the meeting and was able to get the approval. Well, that was one airplane down. And then actually, even before that, a couple months before, I learned that my younger son had developed head and neck cancer. He was in Denver, and he was deemed terminal by the time we found out. He had waited too long the U.S. medical system is not like Dominica, where you just walk in, and he was, he was nonchalant about it. He's a grown man, so I wasn't. He was in his mid-20s, and I wasn't even informed. He had discomfort, and by the time we found out, he was deemed stage 4 terminal, and I went up there and found, it was wrenching. Your son is not going to make it. But we decided to fight anyway, so I got an apartment. So I was living, downstairs from his apartment in Denver with his mom. We got an apartment and spending time there. And so he had decided to get married, at least to enjoy a short time with his girlfriend, because it was likely that he was going to die, but he was also going to do chemo and radiation. And so he did that in 2015. And the night that they got married was the night that evening I got a call that things are falling apart at Jungle Bay, and then the phone went dead. So that happened. Later on in the year too, I got another airplane I wasn't on, crashed in St. Lucia. It didn't quite crash, but the landing gear, the pilot didn't lower the landing gear in time, and we had another aviation incident that was quite costly. So 2015 was a very, very challenging year for me all around, and Tropical Storm Erica was certainly a part of that. I got the call. I just got out of bed. I freaked out. I called people, in that area. They said they didn't know what was going on. I couldn't reach anyone, and I had a hotel with 43 guests. And my staff and everything. And here I am in Denver. I told my son and his wife and his mom, I got to go. And next day I got a plane to the Virgin Islands, pack up corned beef and whatever, filled the Beach 99 and came to Dominica and landed at Canefield, because at that time Douglas Charles was closed because of the tropical storm. We landed in Canefield, and I was ready to go to Jungle Bay. And I found out I couldn't go to Jungle Bay because all roads were blocked. It was totally disconnected. But the worst thing is there was no communication coming from that side. So I heard rumors of tremendous death in Petit Savan. I had seen some some flights, some helicopters had gone with the Prime Minister and with the telecoms and so on. And the images that they got were just harrowing of Jungle Bay. And I just knew everyone had died. And I couldn't do anything. And I was going crazy in Roseau, and I went up to Newtown and tried to get someone to get a boat. And the police stopped me, and they said they were going to arrest me because I was going to get Dominica in more trouble than it is getting someone to go with a boat out there, because no boat can land there. But you're sitting out there, and your people are probably lost. And there's nothing you can do, and you're not there with them, and your ship went down. So that was very harrowing for me, and I desperately was trying to get there with no means, and called around. And eventually, when I was at the airport, I ran into the Prime Minister, because he was actually getting on a helicopter to do whatever, and he said he was leaving the island actually, right? And he said, I've been thinking about you at Jungle Bay. I flew over, Sam. I just have to prepare you for the worst. It doesn't look good. But I want you to take courage, and I want you to rebuild in Dominica. Rebuild Jungle Bay. And I thought, that is a madman, because at that time my relationship with the Prime Minister wasn't positive at the time. A. And B, I don't even know if my people are alive or dead. And this man is telling me about rebuilding Dominica. This is a crazy man. He said, anything I can do to help. I said, well, what you can do to help is to try to help me to get a flight there, and get ECA to approve. That's Eastern Caribbean Civil Aviation Authority. They were not approving for me to get a helicopter to hire from Antigua to pick me up to take me there. They said that's additional risk, and they're not going to allow it. And so I said, what you can do is you can call Mr. Raphael from ECA and get him to approve that, because I really need to get there to see what's up with my people. And he called, and they still didn't approve it, but I was able to get Javi Nazard, who's the French, I think, honorary consul here, And the Guadeloupeans were interested, and I told them, we have a lot of people from Guadeloupe and Martinique, a lot of French people. I don't know if they're dead or alive. They're at Jungle Bay, and you guys gonna come see how your people are doing. And it was on that was the hook that I used to get them to agree to go and stop at Jungle Bay and see if any of the French nationals had been injured or had died or whatever. And so they agreed to pick me up and give me a lift on it. And I was happy, and I got on the helicopter and we zipped over, and I was just, we flew by Jungle Bay, and we didn't see any sign of life, a lot of just damaged stuff. And I said, oh God, it's over. And they said they don't know what to do. They have to go to Lapton. I said, well, at least stop by the school and drop me off there. Just drop me off by the school. And when we got up by Daly's school, I saw all the people come out, and they were like, and I saw my people. Some of my people were there. And the helicopter went down by the school, so we can walk up to Jungle Bay. And then my manager came out, and Africa from the spa, and some of them that had stayed there, because they were marooned there for like 2 or 3 days with just by themselves with no communication. And I hit the ground, and I just started crying, and I said, tell me what happened, who's gone, who's died, because I see the place, and they're like, Sam, everybody's fine. Nothing happened. We've been here getting water from the river and cooking, and everybody's having it. I said, no, tell me what happened. Because I almost didn't want to believe, based on what I saw. I couldn't believe that everyone was spared. And I just started crying. And for me, that was like, oh my God. And everyone wondering, why am I crying like that? Because, I felt like, for me, it was just so wrenching. Everything, the property didn't matter. It didn't really matter. The only thing that was matter is these people, and they're all alive. Everybody's good. So I quickly told them, I said, look, I told my managers, I said, look, say to these guys, we have a lot of French people, we letting the French out first, but keep the French people back last, because they'll come back for the people. So all the Americans, all those from any place else, put them on the helicopters and let's get them. So they started shuttling our people back to the park in Goodwill, and so they made whatever many 6 flights or whatever, took the French people last, and that's how we were able to bring our people on this side of the island. And I slept good that night, I tell you, because that was 3 nights of zero sleep, just in torment, thinking that all my people had been destroyed, all my people had died, and now I found that all the people were good. The buildings, we can rebuild that. You can always replace that, but you can't replace lives. Huh? So it was good. It was a good feeling. Sad, because a lot of the people that we knew in Petit Savan had lost their lives, and that was harrowing. And people really close to you when we work. I mean, we were really close with either they provided bee oil, or they provided flowers, or they provided whatever. They lost their livelihoods, and that was horrible. And the life had changed in that entire area. Jungle Bay had become the anchor of the Petit Savan, Daly's area. The people were so proud of it. It was a proven concept in that area. We did it, together. The farmers, they were so proud. Everybody was just. We had 65 employees, and I can't even remember how many. Maybe 30 or 40 different suppliers. So many people earned a livelihood. Even now, when I go to that area, I go to a funeral or whatever. Even sometimes the preachers on the pulpit have to mention when you're going to come back to open Jungle Bay there. Because. It's been such a loss for them in that area, because there's nothing else there right now.
At the time, how many villas?
At that time, we had 35 rooms. It wasn't villas. We call them cabins there, but we have to charge them more now, so we call these villas. Yeah.
So now that was a horrifying experience, model number 1. But then you were still brave and decided that you're going to do model number 2. I remember some years ago that a gentleman, Leo Ford, came to me and spoke with me through another person, brought me to St. Thomas, because he had his business also in St. Thomas, and was interested in Monokuma. Wanted to do villas in Monokuma. You had at the time, how you call this? You had Jungle Bay in Delis, and he wanted.
I was building Jungle Bay in
Oh, you were
Daly,
building
so-
Jungle Bay in Daly, said, yeah. And then he wanted to model something like what you had.
Correct.
Because he spoke quite a lot about you.
Mm-hmm.
And I too thought that he was a mad guy too. Because when I found myself in the area of Monokuma, I was like, how could someone think of building? I think he wanted to build about 60 villas, 60 to 100 villas in that area. And I'm like, it's crazy. And then comes Sam and decided that he was going to build a second model. But give us the experience of that, of, as you said earlier on, of the Prime Minister giving you that hope, wanting to build. Tell us a little bit more.
Well, when I realized everyone was safe, and then you start to think again, is this how you want to end it? Is this how? And I felt like it was unfinished business. So the logical play was to continue with the Barbuda project, because I then had all approvals and we were ready to go. You called it a shovel-ready project. We were at least a year ahead of any kind of building in Dominica. And so the natural move would be to build the Mystic Bay in Barbuda and to move on from Dominica. But, this invitation from a second prime minister, remember, this is the second prime minister that I got invitation from. The first one was in 1996. And this one was almost 20 years later in 2015. And he was earnest, I felt, when he said what he said to me, and I gave thought to it, and I thought, okay, well, let me at least consider rebuilding, because there's so many livelihoods here. This is a proven concept, and you can't just abandon the island. And so I made a decision to rebuild in the same location, to rebuild Jungle Bay. But then the road through Petit Savan had to be abandoned. So the government made the decision that they weren't going to rebuild it right away because of the vulnerability and the concern that people were going to die. They even shut down the village of Petit Savan and encouraged people to move outside of that, got apartments for them. And they eventually decided to build an apartment village in Bellevue to accommodate them. So the only access to Jungle Bay at the time would have been through the La Plaine side, the Botica, La Plaine, River Syriac, Grand Fond side, Mont John side, along the East Coast. And that East Coast is vulnerable. And oftentimes the Rosalie River may get high and go over the bridge and so on. And without having that Roseau southern access, I came to the conclusion that it was not prudent for me to rebuild in Point Milan. So that was the main consideration that led to me making the decision. Yes, the Prime Minister has reached out to me, and the government is fully supportive of a rebuild. And yes, it's a proven concept in Dominica, and it's really a Dominica product. If I build, as the Prime Minister suggested, something someplace else, let that be, an addition. But the concept of Jungle Bay is Dominica. So I then went back in my memory, and I started looking around, maybe other places on the island, different politicians, different, MPs from different constituencies thought that the Jungle Bay would be good in their constituency. That's a lot of jobs for their people, And so I was considering that, and that's when I spoke to the head of Invest Dominica, who's a dear friend of mine, Rhoda Joseph. And Rhoda said, Sam, have you ever thought of, there's a place in Monokuma that's by Soufriere. I went there with someone and he bought this land, but he's been trying to sell it for the past 10 years. I think it would be good for Jungle Bay. Then I recalled what you're saying, because the gentleman did approach me around 2005, right when I opened Jungle Bay. And he had just bought Monokuma from the government, and he had gotten into some problems in the British Virgin Islands and had decided to abandon that, and he was looking for a buyer. So he approached me to try to buy Monokuma in 2005 to build a Jungle Bay on this side. And I told him, my friend, I just got into this. You have no idea what I had to deal with to get this thing started. The last thing I need is to try to build another Jungle Bay in Dominica. I'm not interested. and that was it. And he had put the property for sale, and he had a broker, and it didn't get sold. No one seriously looked at it, and it was just sitting there. And so I said, but Rhoda, how do I get a hold of this guy? I don't know how to reach him. He said, well, she said, Kenny Green is the broker. I didn't know Kenny well. So he said, Kenny Green, you know Kenny? I said, I know of Kenny Green. Well, give me his number. So she gave me his number. I called Kenny. This is Sam. I'm looking for a new home for Jungle Bay, and I understand that you're representing the gentleman, Mr. Ford, that owns this property, and I'm interested in looking at it, going on it. I don't know exactly where the entrance is. Kenny said, well, that's not correct because, I gave up that listing 5 years ago. No one wasn't interested in the place, and I don't even know where to find this man, Mr. Ford. So I don't know what to tell you. I said, well, if you do the work and find this man and we make a deal, tell you what, you will be the broker of record and you'll make your full commission. Imagine you did the work and you didn't get anything for it because, selling real estate is commission based. Now I am a buyer. If this works out, you get your commission. So he said, oh, great. So he found the guy. He was in Panama. He had some problems. And to make a long story short, I made a deal with him and bought the property from him after some negotiation.
I can imagine, because I know the guy very well. I mean, I was actually working with him back and forth, been to St. Thomas to see some of his business that he owned, hotels that he owned, or his shareholders of. So I knew that he really wanted to sell that. And it's something if I knew at that time, it would have been at the tip of my finger to get the number for you, but that's life.
Yes.
But
you would have gotten the commission, you see?
No, Sam. You purchase the land, you decide to take that risk, you look at the topography, were you still convinced that you could do it?
Oh yeah, that compared to the old Jungle Bay or what I've done in the Virgin Islands, that was an easy build for me. Because you become an expert at something after doing it over and over and over. And I had been developing real estate for many, many years. And so a layperson, when they go and look at real estate, they may be intimidated. They may be, but for me, it's a blank canvas, An artist find a canvas and I can draw the picture. If you are not an artist and you have a canvas, you don't know where to start. Or if you are a sculptor, I pick up a rock, I don't know it's a stone, but you already see what beautiful sculpture you can get out of it. So from the time I set foot on that property, I had an outline of an idea and walked and figured out what I would need. I would need 2 yoga studios because we had more demand than we can handle on the other side, this and that, and where this would go. And so I had a general idea, and the land would be suitable very well. The view from there so all of those things you juxtapose, and then the access is easy, from this side, and there's good diving on this side. You didn't have a swimming beach on the east, and so you figured the advantages and the disadvantages on the two sides. And so for me, it took all of these things. I can probably process them within 5 minutes in my head because I have expertise in that. As the other person, they may not even know these factors to consider. So I made the decision then that it was a good place to develop Jungle Bay 2.0.
The two projects, 1996 started with a re-engineered CBI program. In 2019. 2015? 17?
Well, 2017 construction started.
Right,
Yeah.
2017, you again started the project on another CBI program. How difficult it is to sell concept of that magnitude to investors to really have the faith in you and to invest and make this possible?
Well, I would say this: the day I got my approval quicker than the others, relatively speaking, for a number of reasons. One, Jungle Bay was a proven concept, and I think the government, they really wanted that one to happen quickly. It wasn't some guy with an idea that was thinking about doing something. It was people. I had clients, I had employees. We needed, just like if you have a factory, you need a new plant, but you have the business. So it was keen, and I also kind of knew exactly I needed to get it done to get the ball rolling. So the sense of urgency was high. I had been in this space now as a developer for close to 40 years. And I had certainly been in Dominica at that time for 20 plus years, made good contacts, resources, everything. So it wasn't some guy starting from scratch. So every time you do something, the next one you do gets to be a little easier. So this was a bit easier than the previous. Cecil wouldn't think I'm a madman because Cecil knew, on the other side, or those who knew me even from the Virgin Islands knew even more, So even whether it is to convince someone outside or an investor, they were quite keen because I had a proven track record. So that certainly helped.
Many a times people tend to think that you front load the cash.
Mm-hmm.
You can maybe help people have a greater understanding as to how these projects actually will kick off.
So you front load, first of all, you buy the land on your own. At least that's how I know to do the deal. And I had some insurance and I was able to put it towards that. I didn't get the insurance that I thought I deserved. You never do. You pay your premium and then the insurance negotiate with you. And when I got what I took what I got and bought the land, and then I started the development and took some out of pocket money. You expect to do that. You at the end in business is when you start to receive your return on your investment, not up front. So I put some money in, and then I went to a bank, the National Bank, and they agreed to front load, you call it, but they agreed to loan me a significant amount of money. Not like when I was doing the first Jungle Bay, they would not have entertained no institution in the region. But now you have a proven concept, you see. So anything that, even when I do it after or someone else will do it after, they say they want to do it like Jungle Bay, now the bankers sitting up because they know of the success. And so they provided millions of dollars up front. And that enabled me to get the ball rolling without a dollar from the CBI program, because that you have to go through, find the clients, deal with this lengthy application, and go through all of this drama, and then draw down with there's a procedure for drawing down and stuff. So that was going to take time, but for me it was important to get the product going because I had Jungle Bay guests that came every year, and I needed to rebuild. It was 2015. By 2019, I needed to have something else. I may lose these people forever. And so there was a sense of urgency. So I put, all the machinery in place, including financing and so on, and got the ball rolling. And it became easier for me to find investors. I had to sell these villas to persons, and there were agencies I knew, people. I was a known entity at the time. So it became not too difficult. So Jungle Bay ended up being the first property again to open under the CBI program, the first phase of Jungle Bay. Also, I opened it in a phased approach. Yeah, so when you develop a resort, sometimes some of them are structurally designed to open one time. I generally don't believe in that. My experience, someone else's experience may be different. But I'm saying, what if the financing doesn't come through at the end? What if something happens? At least open the first phase, get your training, get the bugs out of the system. Why do you build the second phase? And so Jungle Bay has always been a phase type development. So we were able to open the first phase in 2019, just 2.5 years later. And that helped to sell because people actually saw things coming. They saw completed units. You'd want to buy that than some idea that some guy has or some unfinished product. And so I was able to do that. And COVID hit in 2020. COVID caught me actually on a hospital bed at UCLA Neuroscience Hospital. Most Dominicans don't realize, or people, I was incapacitated. I had gotten in an accident, and my spinal cord had collapsed. Not right away, but over time it deteriorated to the point where my neurologist told me that I was about 3 months away from being a quadriplegic, not being able to use your hands or your feet for life. And so after the 2019 election, the day of election, I got on a plane and started the process, got everything tested, and there was burning and pain and sensation, and numbness and everything, and my nerves, my spinal cord had no more gel in it, and it was just and actually a part of it now is gone, and so within a month I was at UCLA neuroscience, and they split my spine open and put 5 titanium plates screwed on my neck, and my neck was in a cast. Like when your hand is in a cast, my neck was in a cast. January, February, March of 2020, and right when they took the cast off so that I can begin getting physical therapy, COVID struck the week I was supposed to start, and so I couldn't move like half an inch of my neck, and I had to get instructions online and self-medicate myself. So I chartered planes all the way to Dominica because there were no commercial flights at the time, because the island had shut down for COVID. So I kind of had to charter my way in and get to Jungle Bay and and Jungle Bay healed me, the gardens, the yard, walking through, all my staff. Mr. No, don't pick that up, because, I'm used to, if you can't do it, I'll pick up the pickaxe and do it myself while I do that, and so I had to be patient and came back in April, and by June again, I went up for the second surgery. And so, if in my demise, Cecil, the titanium in my body is probably worth more than, so don't let them throw me away. At least take the titanium and resell it. But it's been a fight. Life is about struggle and overcoming challenges. And so I walk a lot. I have to move. Just sitting here, I never sit this much because I have to keep moving. I have to keep. If you see me in meetings, sometimes I get up and walk. I have to keep moving because you feel the nerves locking up. You feel like you're getting atrophy. So I'm still sort of healing and in therapy. But you have to keep.
So I
going.
can say sorry. I can say sorry.
Hmm?
I can say sorry for having you for
making me sit down. Yeah, that's hint.
No. As we're coming closer to the end of the program, Sam, I would need to find out from you in reference to investors, which are the most attractive in terms of the type of business that you are in. Is it the Europeans, the Asians, the Americans, or the Caribbean?
Okay, let me close on my health. I feel fine. I know people out there may be wondering. We don't quite know. We all have health issues. Sometimes we don't. But in terms of my spine and so on, I'm doing a lot of exercise. I walk through Galion every day, 6 miles. And so on. I keep it going. So I would say I'm playing my golf every chance I get. So I feel I'm in pretty good shape. And I do. We all have our health issues. But we don't know how much more time we have. So I'm living like this is the last week, but I'm also living like I have all the time in the world. So enjoying both of those. So you're asking me what type of investors you mean for the CBI program?
Yes.
So CBI clients generally are people that need a second citizenship. And in most cases, what are the reasons they need second citizenship? Is for security, because some countries have such political instability, social instability, that people high net worth people want a way out. They want a hedge, so they need a second citizenship to some places in case they have to move. You name the country that's unstable. Just think of unstable regions and unstable countries. The second most popular reason, or maybe the first, so between those two, is ease of travel. So people that live in countries where they have passports, some African countries, some Asian countries, a lot of population, a lot of poor people are hesitant to allow them to come to their countries, Europe and the US and wherever. So it's difficult for them to get visas or to get access. And a lot of business people, they need to move. And so you want to get a second citizenship so you can get ease of travel and other reasons. So the source would be dictated by those things. So certainly you get a lot from Asian countries. Asia's, I don't know the percentage, but it's certainly more than half of the world's population live in Asia, and so that continent, have a wide range of persons, and they would want to be a citizen of a small, democracy like Dominica or like these Caribbean states. And then we're finding a lot from African countries. You have in Nigeria alone, you probably have, I don't know, about 40,000, 50,000 millionaires. People think of Africa and they think poverty but you have a huge disparity in the wealth and poverty. And, people think, there's a lot of corruption. And so, sure, you have corruption, but I think the vast majority of people are just enterprising, hardworking people. You have corrupt ones, yeah, but you also have, I think for the most part, and that's what the review of the clients and the review of the process helps to weed out. So you get a lot of persons from Africa, from Asia and Africa, and that's sort of the main regions. The United States, Canada, the Europe, and so on. These areas are viewed as stable, so you don't have the security issue. And those countries, you have passports that are highly mobile, so they have ease of travel. So as a result, you get very few clients from those places.
No, Sam. It has been a talk from a chosen few in reference to the CBI program, with the intention that the CBI program is about selling passports. Mm-hmm. What's your view on that, knowing that you're part of the program?
Again, some people interchange selling passports with citizenship by investment and so on. And again, the passport is, as I've mentioned, it's not correct. It's not selling. You can't sell a passport. It's a travel document that you obtain when you become a citizen. So you can say, well, you're buying citizenship or you're paying for it, and you have different paths, whether you invest in a project like Jungle Bay where you expect a return on your investment or some kind of consideration, or you make a payment to the government and the government would invest in a government project, whether directly or through a contractor, the airport, or what have you. So those are the options. And my experience with the program, quite frankly, has been pretty positive. That's my experience, and based on, I think, the evidence of the contribution that the program has made to the infrastructure development of this country has been tremendous. Housing, health care, infrastructure, especially after the hurricanes and the tropical storms. And there's a lot of things. I mean, if the government did not have the cash flow from the CBI program, the country would have been, in a horrible state financially. There wasn't any taxes coming in, or any money to rebuild, or even going beyond the housing communities that were built. The government, gave, I don't know how many people, but I'm sure thousands of people, money to rebuild their homes that didn't have insurance and so on. So it's the benefits to Dominica have been huge. Has it been a perfect thing? As an entrepreneur, I don't believe in being satisfied. So no, it hasn't been perfect, and maybe more could have been done and more can be done in certain ways. But I don't think you can argue that we haven't seen some real contribution from the city CBI program to the development of Dominica, even to the point where the government has had cash flow to assist people with health and education, because many young people have gone and have gotten higher education in the United States. Unlike my time, I didn't have a government to give me money to go to U.S. universities. I mean, you have many Dominicans going to these schools on the government's dime, So I just think that the contribution has been tremendous. I know some people have some criticisms about it. I'm not about to disparage their criticism or get into any partisan, you know me, Cecil. I don't want to get into that direction. As we could keep it on a level. But I think honestly, the government, you have to say a lot has been done just trying to be objective with respect to the CBI fund.
In the background, Jungle Bay, what's your view about this? What's in your background?
Like I say, on reflection, I'm satisfied. And even though I say I'm not satisfied, I on reflection, I think we've done, a fairly relatively good job. There's still more work to be done at Jungle Bay. We need to work on continuing to improve the product always. You never get to the point. Listen, you always try to do better today than you did yesterday, and always try to do better tomorrow than you do today. So there's always an opportunity for improvement. But to have gotten us this far, I'm pretty happy about the contribution that we've made, and I just want to see the island move. You can't be one property doing well and in a sea of an economy, that should be doing better. And even for us to do better, we need airlift. And the only way we can get airlift is to have other properties do well to build more economy of scale to travel to Dominica. So I'd really like to see some of these other hotels, whether they're CBI or small bed and breakfast or whatever, do better. I want them to do better. We need them to do better so that the destination can do better in tourism, so we can buy more produce from the people and have a more dynamic economy. So I think we're doing okay. I'm happy with that, but would be happy to see, much more progress happening in the coming months and years.
Any more projects in mind for Dominica from you?
Not right now, because I'm focused on some things on some other islands. There's one island in particular that I'm going to be doing some pretty heavy stuff in. So Dominica, I'm in and out, and I'm maintaining. I've got a full management team there, so I'm not running the day-to-day of Jungle Bay, but I'm keeping a close eye because that's my baby. It's my home. I like to come and enjoy the island and to walk my loop in Galion and Scott's Head and all over the island. So I'm enjoying it and keeping a close eye to make sure that it remains, as a sustainable enterprise. But at this point, it probably won't be focused on anything else in Dominica. Right now, there is, the Jungle Bay dailies, and I tell you, that is weighing heavily on my heart and my mind, but the conditions have not been right for me to start that, and hopefully I can get that started. I still own the property, and from time to time I do talk to parties that are interested in partnering with me to develop, but I would support. They would take the lead and we would make it happen. Most likely that is what that will happen. I would love to see the rebirth of that Jungle Bay with a niche that could even be better than the one that's here in the East, and I do believe that that's possible. So if I pray, that's what I pray for, that happens. But in terms of what is actually happening right now, I'm focused on some other things in the region.
Is it a misconception or a fact that Sam is a multimillionaire?
Well, I don't count money. I don't consider myself a multimillionaire. I'm just a person. I don't think that the amount of money you have or the assets, I really don't. Someone said, you have so much, that's why you don't know. And that's not the case at all, I have enough to live, as I need to. I don't live an extravagant life. And as long as I have access to do the projects and do the things I need to do, whether it's mine or whatever. And my wealth is not just what I own, it's what I can corral or what I can get to do what I need to do. And that's important. And also my wealth is in how I can support others and the contribution I made, because we're just passing through. Sam doesn't need to be a multimillionaire. That's not important to me. But what contributions am I making? Because pretty soon Sam will be, you'll hear about Sam. Oh, he's no longer with us. What? So my wealth ends then? I'd like my wealth to continue through small businesses, young people that can piggyback on what I'm doing. And so that is the focus. How can we help to empower other people and to leave a legacy? And Sam is interested in a legacy now and not necessarily bank book.
Last caller, good evening to you.
Yes, Cecile. I have a question for Mr. Raphael. I know his area is tourism, being a real estate developer. But I want to ask him, has he considered investing in the factories? Because I know that factories was mentioned earlier. Has he ever thought of reviving the factories we had before so that young people could be employed and we could export a lot of things, instead of importing things?
The short.
Caller.
Thanks for the call, caller. The short answer is no. I don't have any expertise in that, and that's not. I will leave unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. There are people who have expertise in factories, and that's good. And you talk about the support for agriculture and so on. I think tourism really is a good market for these things. So I'm involved in agriculture, not in cultivating so much, but we buy a lot of produce. We buy a lot of stuff from farmers around. So that is our contribution to agriculture, or the arts, or craft, etc. So tourism really is more than just a hotel. It's really more integrated, and I'm interested in that level of integration. But in terms of factories, that's not my area of expertise. But I think those who see the opportunities there and see it's a whole different kettle of fish. And because you're successful and good at one thing, doesn't necessarily mean that you should feel you can be good at everything else. I'm involved in hospitality, and real estate related development, in housing, and in that sort of space, in commercial to some extent, but in real estate. That's been what I've been successful at, and that's what I'm comfortable in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. And as you heard it from Sam, businessman, par excellence, and also, as I said earlier on, that as we've been hearing all week, born Dominican, and also an entrepreneur, known for his innovative investment in hospitality and real estate development. Sam, thank you so very much. Your last words.
Cecil, I'd like to say thank you, and to the Dominican people, I'd like to just say, let's keep the faith. And I will close, and I don't like to close on a negative, but we've had a rough week last week. We lost a lot of good people, Cecil. And I just want to say, people, let's keep it together, keep the love flowing. I've lost in Dominica, in my area, one of the fellow entrepreneurs, one of the, Daniel Langwa, and Dominique, in such a horrific way. And that capped off a week of Dr. Clarissa, my dear friend Etienne. She just enjoyed her birthday with me at Jungle Bay a couple months ago, and she was asking about my health, and I had to do some checks, and her passing, and the others, Mr. Astafan, and also Pastor Augustin's, daughter, and so on. And I don't know. I just feel, certainly, especially Mr. Langwa's passing and the way in which it happened, just awful, awful, awful. And we really need to see what's going on, and to turn around, and the loss of Langwa, what's going to happen to all those people at work. I'm hurt by what he had to go through and what they had to go through, and I can't get that image out of my head. So that's pain there. But then the pain of knowing there are people who work at Colibri Ridge, and it was never a money-making thing for him. It was almost like a hobby, and he spent so much money in the community building, building the primary school after Hurricane Maria, and putting a state-of-the-art kitchen with, Jose Andreas and stuff. He built a dock for the fishermen, at Scott's Head, and he's had so much plans and doing so much for Dominica, and in such a senseless and horrible and horrific way. And the people that work there, what about their livelihood? Is that place going to shut down? And all those people, I don't know how many, but it's dozens of them. Are they going to be out of a job now? And even the one that was, the detained, arrested in connection to this, he's also an entrepreneur in that area, and he's also doing business, and he employs people. And what about the employees that work there? What about their livelihood? I just think on so many levels, it wasn't a good week, huh? And I just say we have to come together and forgive each other when we sometimes we cross each other, or we think we have, or we think someone has, and let's try to find a way to live with each other, man, and not in this kind of negative energy vibe. There's got to be a better way. Got to be a better way.
While you're saying that, Sam, I quite understand what you're saying, and I too have the same sentiment that you have. But one of the craziest things for Dominica, and that's why I think we need to call on the Ministry of Tourism to quickly try to abate the negative that will be on the international stage. As Dominicans, as Dominica the country, it's a safe haven, and we want everything to happen for us for the best. So I'm also calling on central government quickly to do what is required to help in the image of the name of Dominica, because we know that it will hit the media, the international media.
It's already hitting it.
Right.
We're already seeing the stories out there.
Right.
And they say 3 people were arrested, but they didn't say their nationalities. And the assumption is that it's 3 Dominicans, that have been arrested for this heinous thing. And then people may be afraid to come visit. People, all of a sudden, it gives the country a bad image, and that's in addition to the people that immediately lose their lives. So on so many levels, but we have to be proactive in these things. And you're correct. We need to get ahead of the media and to make sure that we tell the story the way in which the story needs to be told. That certainly we need to work on health and safety. I'm not saying that we don't need to step up in that area. We do. We need to work and make sure we keep things and maintain law and order and safety for our people and for visitors. But Dominica is not a place where you have that kind of thing happening. And so we need to clarify that so other investors and other visitors don't, think that we are the ones out there waiting to do these things, these horrible, horrible things. This is not Dominican in terms of a reflection of us at all. And we need to ensure that our image doesn't go down, because once the image goes down, you don't get to bring it back up again. Huh? Once you're marked as an unsafe place where these things are happening, your reputation is gone. So we need to jealously protect our reputation in Dominica. And I appeal on all Dominicans that are out there to, Dominicans do have some pride. We come home for festival. We love our country. We may not see eye to eye politically, but we all love our country. And I'm just appealing to Dominicans out there to remember to ensure that we in this matter at least, that we ensure we're clear that this is not something that at least the people that were detained, There are 3 expatriates, 3 Americans, and there's been no Dominica associated or arrested in this matter, at least up until this point. And that message needs to go out so that persons don't think that Dominicans are out here engaging in this kind of heinous and just horrible thing. I'm not saying that the accused, I'm not the judge, jury on this matter, so that I just want to be clear on that. They are accused, and the accused have a right, to a trial and so on. But certainly, there's been a long-standing feud, and it's just been an awful situation, and there's been sufficient probable cause to arrest these people, and they are not Dominicans. And at least that statement's of fact and not opinion. And I think that needs to go out so that we can sort of clear our names as best as possible. You can't get away from a little mud. Dominica will still be hurt by this, but at least you can minimize the amount of negative press that we'll get, as we try to build our country.
As an investor, you have said that with a passion. I love that.
Yes.
I really love that.
Yeah.
I love the way that you were able to make the statement clear to the listeners and to the rest of the world of the separation between who committed the act and
who's accused of.
Or who is accused. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Who is accused for committing the act, and it's of great importance, that the world is aware of that, and I liked how you actually articulate that, and I just want to say thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Cecil, and thank you for to the listeners. For I don't know who's out there. Sometimes you talk on radio, you don't know. I don't know if anyone listens to DBS, Cecil.
You will know tomorrow, because
I just want to animate you, Cecil.
This program is well listened to. The LACU, I remember just after the independence, I did not have it for just about a week, and I was given so many calls, I just felt after the independence, let's just give ourselves a pause. And I just had, again, to ensure that people get back the information, because it's important to know or to take note of the success of our people in Dominica and where they came from. And because of that, the LACO has been able to help us to build and to develop that. So thanks again, Sam.
We tried a program too on Q95 called The Other Side. That was that again, Cecil, it was about bringing out information. And wherever we go, we should just try to bring out as much positive information, and whenever we can, to bring it in a way that brings Dominicans together, So I want to thank you for the tremendous work you're doing. Our friendship, that goes back, way, way back. And I want to thank you for that, just a nice little conversation, a little vibes, and it was nice. Just you and I, just the company, I feel like we've just been having a good time. So thank you, and thank you to the listeners.
Tell me what you think about our social media. What was before you? What do you think?
Oh, you made a nice image, man. You put me to shame. I have to come and learn your skills and techniques for my social media marketing, man. That's pretty good. I'm really impressed with the image that you have and how you've set this thing up. And again, it's all positive, all good, and I wish everyone a good evening.
Thanks again, Sam, and thank you very much to listeners for staying tuned with the Nation Station DBS Radio as we continue till 11 o'clock. Just want to say thank you again and have a very good night.
The station bringing you more music, talk, and news. Whenever there's a breaking story, a new hit, or topics for debate, count on your Nation Station. We are the first for news, the first for talk, and the best in music mixers. So when you want the best and you want it first, tune in to your Nation Station, Radio D.